My people in the east, yo, you gotta wake up. Midwest, dirty south, yo, you gotta stand up. All my homies in the west, yo, you gotta wake up. Wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up. Wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up. Wake up, wake up.
Wake up, everybody, no more sleeping in bed. No more backward thinking, time for thinking ahead. The world has changed so very much from what it used to be. There's so much hatred, war and poverty. Wake up, all teachers, time to teach a new way. Maybe then they'll listen to what you have to say. 'Cause they're the ones who's coming up. The world is in their hands. When you teach the children, teach them the best you can.
Scream peace, do we mean it? Can you feel it when we scream it out loud? Do you believe that we need it? Do you believe that it can get right? Do you believe that the children of the world deserve a good life? Well, if you do, it's time to wake up your mind. We can make it better, and I know it might take some time, but we gotta start somewhere. How about with you and me? From us it goes to others, then we'll have our unity.
All the doctors make the old people well. They're the ones who suffer, who catch all the hell. But they don't have so very long before the judgment day. So won't you make them happy before they pass away?
Wake up, all the builders, time to build a new land. I know we can do it, long as we lend a hand. The only thing we have to do is put it in the blood, and surely things will work out, 'cause they do it all the
I ain't here to take up y'all time. I came to shake up y'all mind. It's everybody's wake up call time. I can't sleep too long. Why they do the people wrong? Let's clean the world up before they sweep you gone. This is real talk. You can peek through songs. So when you feel weak, these words will keep you strong and help make a change for the better. It's hard for one to do it, but we can make some changes together. Stand up here and give thanks to the man upstairs. Put the egos and the pride to the side regardless, and just be role models, parents, artists. We can make it change and we can make it the hardest. If you gon' make a baby, you should make them the smartest. Let them know good and bad, right from wrong, how to roll with the punches when life moves on. And the stress won't take toll if you don't sweat it. The world won't get no better if we don't let it. Let the negative energy ride. Keep hope alive. It's about time that we open our eyes. Wake up, girl.
Everybody, no more sleeping in bed. No more backward thinking, time for thinking ahead. The world has changed so very much from what it used to be. There's so much hatred, war and poverty. Wake up, 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 wake up.
Yeah, well y'all best to vote. I don't care about the guns you tote. Listen to me like you listen to Fahrenheit 9/11. Ain't no time for the second guessing. The words I speak, wake up. The ones who sleep, the leadership's fiction mouth to teach. MCs teach the kids was peace. They don't have to worry about the police. We make them rich so they don't have to thief. Every artist here on this track. We'll make a change here for young cats. This is for everybody, white or black. You better go and vote and get up off your back. This life of rolls on, lift your head, get your voice up. You see the power of the people, it's a choice to ignite love. Now the choice is a gift that our people have to fight for. And the fight's far too personal for any
Good evening, good evening, good evening. We'd like to thank all those who are watching us virtually on the many different platforms. We welcome you this evening to the second round of the Call to Action Virtual Town Hall. I'd like to thank all of you again for joining us, and I'd like to introduce our moderator for this evening. I, as pastor of Christ Temple Church, and on behalf of Christ Temple Baptist Church, we are glad that you are able to watch. We thank you for being able to tune in, and we are also honored to host this occasion tonight. Our moderator for this evening is the one who has called this meeting and called all of the stakeholders and these leaders and panelists together. The assemblyman for the 35 legislative district. Let us all put our hands together for Assemblyman Benji Wimberly at this time.
Good evening. Thank you, Pastor McWilliams. We thank Christ Temple for allowing us to host this for part 2 of our town hall meeting. The impetus behind this meeting obviously was the unfortunate death of George Floyd on May 25th, 2020, 8 minutes and 40 seconds with a knee on his neck, pleading 20 times that he can't breathe and calling for his deceased mother. We've all saw the video. We all understand the impact. We also understand the impact. This is not, unfortunately, new. There's Breonna Taylor, Maurice Gordon, Ahmaud Arbery, you name it. Protest, march, Black Lives Matter. The great loss of John Lewis during this time since we've last met. It's time for us as a community to make some good noise, some good trouble. We need to do what's best for our community, and we also need to, as an elder now in this community, to leave a legacy of being fearless and fight for what's right. Voting coming up, the elections, the impact of Kamala Harris to be the vice president on the board. That's worth a round of applause. That's a major accomplishment to have a woman of color, African American, Jamaican descent, Indian descent. She's our sister. She's our sister on that ticket. November 3rd, rallying at the polls to make sure that we put people in places that are going to take care of us, that we make sure the legacy of John Lewis is never dead, and that we continue to fight for him. We also need to make sure that we continue to fight during this COVID-19 for health care. The disparity in health care that we are facing in America has really been exposed to our Black and Latino and people of color, and this is not new. This is not new. You think about it, you look at the numbers. We are 3 times more likely to die from it and 6 times more likely to contract COVID-19. And that comes from pre-existing health conditions, from diabetes to respiratory issues to obesity to squalid living conditions sometimes. So we want to continue to fight for that. We need to be in the forefront when it comes to education. We see now that with distant learning, we see the real digital divide, that a zip code makes a matter of a major difference on how somebody lives and where they are. That we need to know people, not only in the state, through the nation, to understand that our lives are a little different. In the city of Paterson, we are 8.4 square miles and over 160,000 people. And we have multiple dwellings where grandma and auntie live within maybe a 3-bedroom with 6 and 7 people in that bedroom. So it's a little different situation than people are used to dealing with. We need to make sure that the digital divide is closed and continuous closed here, not just in Paterson, but throughout the United States. And of course, law enforcement. We want to make sure that we are not going to be the victims of circumstance just because the color of our skin or how we dress or how we talk or where we ride through. Anywhere in America should be open to all of us. We want to make sure that proper protocols are in place when it comes to policing. We also want to make sure that our young people do not have a fear of police officers. There's no reason that young people should be afraid of officers in their communities. And bottom line is that housing and where we come with and the quality of living, that seemed to be one of the biggest topics that we faced and that we deal with. We want to put ourselves in a position that not only health, education, and housing is something that we can, as a community, continue to fight for and make sure that we have opportunity to live in situations that puts us in a safe place. Many people talk about the violence in our community, but the violence is the impact of 401 years of injustice, 401 years of racism. There is no coincidence that there are violence in certain centers, urban centers throughout the United States. That is not only a pact that I will continue to say, a fight that I will continue to say, that we do not own any gun companies. We do not own any boats that bring the drugs in our communities. We do not have any of those issues. There is not a coincidence. So we have to continue to fight for these things as we sit here. So let's get started. And I'm not going to introduce our panelists. I want to get right into it. I'm going to start off with the mayor to say a brief introduction of yourself, and we'll go right down the line to Zelly.
Thank you, Assemblyman. Good evening, Paterson. So during this pandemic, our priority has been to keep residents of the city safe. And I'm proud to say that for the most part, we've done what we can to decrease those who have been infected by COVID-19. At our peak on April 16th, we had 262 cases in one day. Now we're averaging 7 or 8 a week. But we still have to keep our guard up and our masks up as well. And it's been a very difficult time, not just dealing with that virus, but the virus of racism and the virus of gun violence. But quite frankly, now more than ever, we need solidarity in this city, especially during a pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Zelly.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Zelly Imani, or Zelly Thomas. I'm a co-founder of Black Lives Matter Paterson. I'm also a Paterson public school teacher. I've been involved in the Black Lives Matter movement since it started in Ferguson, Missouri, and I've been on the front lines ever since, risking my life, risking my livelihood, being shot at with rubber bullets, being maced, and even being arrested here in my hometown of Paterson, New Jersey, fighting for Black lives. But against police brutality isn't the only issue that we've been fighting against. As the mayor stated, we've been fighting the other virus, COVID-19. And with our group, Black Lives Matter, we started the North Jersey Mutual Aid, and we deliver over 6,000 meals to the senior citizens here in Paterson, New Jersey. And we've been fighting against evictions. We've been fighting for moratoriums on evictions, fighting for moratoriums on foreclosures as well, because we know that the people who's going to be most impacted by COVID-19 is going to be Black and brown communities. So, you know, I'm continuing to be on the front lines for all these issues because Black lives do matter.
And I'm going to, Assemblywoman, if you could, we're going to go to you last, all right? So, Superintendent Schaefer.
We have been working through the pandemic since schools closed in March, delivering over 1 million meals to all of our children at 8 different meal sites. We have a great group of volunteers, as well as my team, who was out there early on in March and April. And right now we're struggling with closing that digital divide. Unfortunately, 4 years ago when I became superintendent, I had a 3-year plan, and that was to get our high school students one-to-one devices, and the next year to get our middle school and then our elementary. Unfortunately, we were able to only do the high schools because the money was not there, and we continued to be underfunded and had to eliminate teachers, so we could not get those devices. Fortunately, right in June, when COVID money came through, we ordered $3.5 million worth of devices. And right now, we still have a shortfall of about 4,000 devices that we're looking for on a daily basis to see if there's companies locally that would be able to look at their inventory. So we're still short those 4,000. But we're continuing to educate our children, whether it's through devices and remote learning, and we'll continue to do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Pastor Weldon McWilliams. I am the pastor of this great church, Christ Temple Baptist Church, located here in Paterson, New Jersey. Also a member of a grassroots organization, Platform Over Party, where we seek to address issues that are impacting Black folk, oppressed folks, exploited folks, and we seek to address those issues one issue at a time. And the issue that we are currently organizing around is trying to get a universal basic income in the city of Paterson and move the state of New Jersey towards a living wage. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Kenny Simmons, lifelong Paterson resident and current president of the Paterson Board of Education. As Superintendent said, and the mayor and Zelly said, we've been working since March, since this pandemic, since schools have closed. The board has been meeting nonstop, and actually just came here today from a meeting. Last night, we were able to introduce a resolution that keeps us in remote learning until at least November 1st. We will have an assessment by October 15th, but we will assess and make a determination on whether or not we'll go back on November 1st. If conditions aren't favorable, then that date will move. But again, we've been fighting, constantly meeting, constantly making sure that the schools are safe, making sure teachers are safe, because we don't want to go back into buildings and put people's lives in danger.
All right. And at this time, I'm going to ask my Assemblymate, Shavonda Sumter, to summarize some of our past meeting. And these are some of the questions that will probably come back at you today. A lot of questions are repeat questions from the last town hall meeting. So we ask our viewing audience to please send in any new questions that you may have. And I want to make it fully clear, we did received quite a few questions last time about Jameek Lowry. We could not address those questions due to the legalities of that pending lawsuit and any other pending lawsuits that involve the city of Paterson or any of our panelists. So with all due respect, please understand that we cannot answer those questions. It's no slight to you at all. So Assemblywoman.
Thank you, Assemblyman, and thank you for your leadership. Leadership does matter, who we have in office. So I want to remind folks that November 3rd is an election. 83,000 people who are on probation and parole are eligible to register to vote so they can vote for a president of these United States on November 3rd. Our last meeting was extremely impactful. We focused on public safety and prevention, the administration, city administration, budget and finance, environment, infrastructure, and public works. We also looked at community and economic development, our legal courts and our municipalities, recreation, education, and youth. For public safety, and this is just so you all have a sense of the actions that took place and what we're doing to address the issues and the questions. We heard from representatives from the Paterson Police Department, the police chief, in fact. The Sheriff's Department was present at the July meeting. We learned that there is still PAL support of community programs. There's improvement needed in community relations and programs. There's consideration needed for recreation, expansion, and community programs. Recruitment of officers to serve the community with representation that looks like the community. There's legislation moving through Trenton to address the number of civil unrest issues that we face. A civilian review board commission, false reporting of 911, the use of force are all moving through the state legislature that Assemblyman Wimberly and myself are working on. Police response time reported within minutes of the call. However, the community perception is that the response time needs improvement. We have a data request for the percentage of Paterson residents who work in the public schools, city hall, police, and fire departments. We have a data request on the impact of the community precinct response calls and
Assemblywoman, it's coming out a little muted on the thing, just a little muted.
Let's see. How's that? Okay, we'll do one mask versus two. All right. We have a data request on the impact of the community precinct response calls in action, recruitment data of the number of Black and Latino recruits for police leadership. The administration, budget, and finance. Currently, there is no municipal funding for community programs or grassroots organizations. There's anti-violence initiatives that are partnered with the police and community-based organizations like Ceasefire. COVID-19 impact on the city budget. We're requesting a report for the tax collections for the third quarter. There's a state moratorium that's continued for evictions. Environment, infrastructure, and public works. Clean streets, consistent trash and recycle pickup, access to clean parks and recreation. Safe space for seniors to leave their property, apartment, or maintain their property. Community and economic development. Determine developer responsibility for investment in the city parks and recreation activities. Collaborative agreement with developers to use local talent and hiring for jobs. Zoning for auto shops, corner liquor stores, and capacity for limitations and impacts on our neighborhoods. Share with the zoning boards to provide intelligence to us on how we can achieve this. Housing development capacity review that includes green space, small business development, and share that information with the planning board and the housing commissioners. Legal municipal courts. Inquire from the mayor and administration about the court's fines, collections, and operation. Review primary citations for quality of life issues such as noise, drugs, and prostitution. Recreation, education, and youth. Paterson Public School Superintendent shared the vision for a social and emotional learning environment. Request data breakdown of the race and demographic information of school district employees. Yes, African American history is part of the school curriculum. The state has also invested in the Amistad curriculum, and we will investigate the implementation of that. School reopening will be remote, which we heard just a few moments ago from the board president of education. Our next steps you'll hear today will be to continue to talk through the issues and communicate. This data and information has been submitted to the Assemblyman and will continue to build upon the community's agenda. Thank you, Assemblyman.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. And this information also will be sent to our mayor, superintendent, and all the other stakeholders that these concerns are here. So we want to make sure people understand that we're not just hosting a town hall meeting. We have requests, and we will continue to follow up, and we will keep the community updated on how our leaders follow up on these requests. But let's get to the questions. And once again, if you're out in the viewing audience, you can send your question via Facebook. We are on Christ Temple's Facebook page, and also you can send them to WimberleyEvents@gmail.com. Both are being checked, and we could get your questions in. But Zelly, you have the first question. As the leader of Black Lives Matter, what ways have you tried to bring community and police together outside of defunding the police?
So right now, the main thing for us isn't necessarily to bring the community and the police together. Just to be clear, the main thing is trying to change laws, change policies, and change minds in order to benefit the black community. So we can't always focus on what the police think, because the police will always think some type of way, right? They'll always think in order to preserve themselves, and they'll always think what they want to think. So in order to avoid this constant battle and this constant dialogue, we have to do another approach, which is focusing on our activism and focusing on our legislative body. One of the reasons why I say that is because sometimes I listen to speeches by Martin Luther King or Malcolm X, and they're still talking about police brutality in the 1950s and the 1960s. When I watch things about Rodney King, and it happened like over 25 years ago, they talk about having this dialogue with the police. We've been having dialogue with the police for over 50 years, 25 years, 75 years. At this point, if dialogue isn't getting us to the point where we need to be, we need to change a different avenue. And I believe that the avenue that the Black Lives Matter movement has been taking is pushing us in the right direction and is getting us farther than we ever been getting before, just from not dialogue.
All right, Zelly, we'll come back to you about the legislation question. Obviously, I will also reach out to my assembly mate to talk about some of the legislation that the state of New Jersey and national legislation when it comes to police brutality and concerns of racial unrest here in the United States. But our next question is for the mayor. Mayor Saya, why do you not support the creation of a Black Lives Matter mural being in front of the Underground Railroad? Would you approve one being placed in another location?
Leaders listen. So today I just had a meeting. Zelly participated in the meeting, and I'm listening to everyone's concern relative to a Black Lives Matter mural. I support a Black Lives Matter mural. There have been several submissions, whether it be on Ellison, Market, the library, and also there was a submission for the police department as well. So I continue to listen. I've engaged a number of organizations. We are going to agree on one site, and we will have a Black Lives Matter mural in Paterson.
All right, and Mayor, on that same note, question, the statues of Christopher Columbus, what is the status of the statues being placed in a museum, moved to another location, donated? Has there been any movement on that?
There was discussion amongst the council, so at this time, I'm sure we'll get an update as to where they're going to store the statue, if that is what they decide to do.
So the council will decide if the statues are being placed in another location outside of where they are now?
Yes, that's where the discussion has started.
Okay, so I see one of our council members. I'll make sure she comes up and answers that at some point. This question is for the superintendent, our board president, Commissioner Simmons. Why aren't there many black male teachers in the school system, and what are you doing to address this issue?
So we have now put a plan together to reach out to the black universities and colleges to send any postings of available positions that we have to them, and then when they have their recruiting affairs for us to attend as well. So our human resources just put that plan together, and we're in developing those relationships with the colleges as we speak, to have a contact person at each one so that we're able to send those advertisements for any vacancies that we have and start recruiting.
Thank you. Commissioner Simmons?
Just to expound on that, I think part of the first part of that question was why aren't they in the system? And
Yes.
from my observation is that they're not in the pipeline. So we have to figure out how we get them in the pipeline, and I think that approach where we're talking about building relationships with HBCUs to talk to those students who are in education, to get them to come into the system, or at least look into teaching as a career. I don't think we have enough of black male teachers now who are talking to our younger generation about teaching, and I don't think they see teaching as a viable career. So I think we have to address some of those issues, but I think the relationships that the district is building with the HBCUs is a start on how we get them into the system and get them into the pipeline.
Thank you. I know as I came in as a young teacher, there were loan forgiveness programs in recruiting teachers, and particularly special education teachers. I know there is a major need for ESL teachers, meaning our Latino brothers and sisters in here, and that's something that you may want to sit down with the DOE and talk about loan forgiveness to bring in ESL teachers and male African-American teachers. I know Rowan University has a program recruiting minority male teachers, Cheney State University, and I believe the program in South Carolina throughout the state is They Call Me Mister. So these are 3 programs that you may want to investigate and that we will place on our other information that we want to request from you. Thank you. Here's a national question, and this is for the mayor and Assemblywoman Sumter. Donald Trump keeps talking about Paterson and voter fraud. What is your response?
First of all, he needs to learn how to spell.
Ladies before gentlemen. Sorry about that, Mayor.
Well, I agree with you, Mayor. He does need to know how to spell Paterson. It does not have 2 T's in it. The great thing that we did in the city of Paterson was that for the state, we changed the laws where if you're doing a vote by mail, there is a signature verification now. There's also no home pickup system. So people were collecting ballots who should not have been collecting ballots. And where we don't have polling places, we now have drop boxes where you can put your ballot so it's not tampered with and it is handled as it should be handled. The other piece is that the good news is we caught the fraud as the laws were intended to do. We caught the fraud. It should not be punitive that we caught the fraud. It should be acknowledged that we changed our laws so that people could not cheat the system and steal people's votes and disenfranchise voters. So let's not be fearful on November 3rd because it is a tactic to get us to not cast our ballot. Your ballot is your ballot, and in fact, we have more people vote with a vote by mail system, all vote by mail system, even though it has its flaws, than we've had during a regular election when we had over 70 different polling sites.
Thank you. And Mayor, I'm waiting for this response. They called Paterson, spelled it with 2 T's. That's the biggest insult, I think.
Well, he's just a big error for the last 4 years, and we can't get those years back, unfortunately. But, Assemblyman, you are right. We did identify the fraud. Give credit to the Attorney General. He's very vigilant, and it came in swiftly, and people have been charged. because the way I view it is your vote has value and your vote is your voice. So there were many Paterson voters that had their voices muted in this last election. So let that be a call to action for November 3rd, which is about 82 days away, that we have to be hyper vigilant because it looks like we have going to be 2 special elections. Definitely one in the 2nd ward and one in the 3rd ward. And I live in the 3rd ward, you live in the 3rd ward, Assemblywoman, you live in the 3rd ward. So we have to keep our eyes open and make sure that no ballots are tampered with going forward. And if we do see that anyone is engaging in that level of foul play again, we're going to notify the appropriate authorities.
All right, and we're moving along pretty good. At this time, Zelly, we're going to come back to you about legislation recommendations. In particular, I want to direct it towards Paterson. I know it's a national issue. Are there any legislative recommendations that Black Lives Matter or Zelly Imani want to make towards Paterson as far as policing or anything that involves the quality of life or racial unrest in the city of Paterson?
Sure, definitely. One of the things I always say is that it's not police officers who make communities safe. It's access to more resources. When you know the safest communities in New Jersey, don't have more police officers. They have access to better jobs, access to quality healthcare, access to quality homes and education, and so forth. So we need to fight for more resources, and that will actually bring down the crime in Paterson. So when we talk about the resources, we do have resources in Paterson. When we take a look at the city's budget, a large percent of the budget, over 26%, is dedicated to the police department budget, whereas the recreation division only gets $2.1 million. So one of the things that we continue to recommend to the city of Paterson is to start to reallocate some of that money from the police department into the recreation and also into anti-violence initiatives. Anti-violence initiatives like the Cure Violence program that's been implemented in Chicago, Queens, New York, and so forth have shown to really impact the level of crime that's being taken place in these communities. So we're saying that if these programs and these initiatives are proven to work elsewhere, why not here in Paterson? Why not invest into programs that will actually do the work? Instead of relying on old tactics that have not worked for so many years, start relying on things that other cities are doing and have seen drastic changes in their communities. So if I would recommend any change in Paterson, is to start to reallocate money into recreation in a large sum into anti-violence initiatives. Not a couple $1,000s, but at least $3 million into anti-violence initiatives and $5 million into recreation.
Thank you. And Pastor McWilliams, I'm going to ask the same question to you about legislation, in particularly geared towards the city of Paterson and most urban centers.
Yes, the group that I belong to, Platform Over Party, we've been active in calling for a universal basic income. We think poverty is an issue that needs to be addressed in the city of Paterson. Paterson's poverty rate is about between 28 and 29%, while the rest of the state of New Jersey sits at about a little under 11%. So we see disproportionate levels of poverty here in Paterson, New Jersey. Also in the black community in Paterson, New Jersey, 28% of the black community is in poverty. So, when we look at Paterson residents, 1 out of every 3.5 residents that we see are in poverty. So one of the things that Platform Over Party is calling for is an eventual move to a living wage. We believe a living wage will be more impactful, impactful than a raise in minimum wage, because we know that people are working full-time jobs, they're working 40 hours a week, and they're still not making enough to get their basic needs met. So we're really calling on, hoping that eventually the state of New Jersey, the city of Paterson, state of New Jersey will move towards a living wage. We think a way to get to that, a path to get to that, is by implementing a universal basic income, which we see there's a pilot program happening in Stockton, California. I know Philadelphia, Pennsylvania has been looking at it, and I think that Paterson can be just as creative and just as innovative in trying to ensure that we have a living wage and a universal basic income to supplement those Paterson residents who are dealing with poverty.
Thank you. And Mayor, while you're here, can you answer both, or do you have any responses to Zelly and to Pastor? Yes.
First, I want to credit Pastor McWilliams because he has been a tireless advocate for universal basic income. He calls in during public portions of city council meetings. Michael Tubbs, the mayor of Stockton, is a friend of mine. We went through the Bloomberg Harvard City Leadership Initiative, and today I'm joining the Mayors for a Guaranteed Income, which is the first step to get UBI funding. So I will keep everyone apprised of where we are with UBI, because I do support that specifically because of what we've had to endure for the last several years, particularly with the emphasis on the last 5 months on how many people are being stricken by this virus, and the unemployment rate in Paterson is almost 30%. So we need UBI in Paterson. To Mr. Thomas's comments, we do dedicate a $1 million grant, community policing unit grant. $300,000 goes towards hiring individuals, young people, for recreation. $100,000 goes towards a community-based group, Men Stand Up. We've also engaged a national organization, Everytown for Gun Safety. They've earmarked $20,000 for Operation Ceasefire, that committee, and they've earmarked $20,000 for the street keepers. In the future, we want to apply for more with Everytown for Gun Safety, because there are grants that are worth over $100,000 that we could use in this city. So as I've stated before, we cannot always police all of our problems away. It's going to require an investment on the grassroots level with community-based organizations. And one last thing I'd like to point out is that we are really focused on improving our parks and our fields. The council with Vice President Mims and our President Flavio Rivera, they've made that commitment. This past Tuesday, they included in the capital budget plan Putnam Oval, Commons Field. We've done Buckley Park, Brandy's Field. We're going to do Eastside Park as well. Hinchliff Stadium, we're bringing that back. So we are going to make sure that we make more of that investment in parks and fields in Paterson.
Okay, on that note, Mayor, and just keep this in the back of your mind, and I'll come back to you because we want to spread it around. The average income of a city employee, average income of a DPW worker, all plays a major factor when you talk about the poverty level. And what Zelly's saying is that, you know, the grants and stuff are good, but a stable budget line item for these items has to be established. So I think that's the point that we talked about last time, and we want to work our way back to that, and that'll be part of our, not ask, but demand, that there is a stable line item for there, and it's been there before. So if the budget for recreation in 2000 was $3 million, and we're now 20 years later, and it's $900,000 less, that's something that was there that was taken out of the budget. So it could be done. So, and then I'm gonna come back to you about our DPW workers and some of our administrators and secretarial workers and their salaries and living wages. But I wanna move on to Superintendent and Commissioner Simmons. How much of a negative effect has the pandemic had on education, specifically as it relates to Black and brown students, and what can be done as far as them catching back up? How much time have they literally lost educationally due to the pandemic?
So they certainly already lost 4 months of education. Unfortunately, like I said earlier, we did not have devices, and so we were doing these paper packets. When you do paper packets, it's only review. And so that's a major problem for us. And there's a lot of catching up that needs to happen. In our restart plan, we do have interventions for our children, but we've got to get all of them that device. And so that's where we are right now. Still have that digital divide. We're almost there, but you know, unfortunately, we had problems with the company that we ordered from, and what's happening in China, and the plant was shut down, and so we're looking for other ways to get those computers to our students. But no matter how many we're short, even if it's 4,000, it still has a major impact on learning loss for our students.
Okay, and Commissioner, you know what? Your question more I want to direct towards our ESL and special needs students. What will the impact be, and what suggestions would you make legislatively for these students to catch up?
So, if it's one thing that this pandemic has shined a light on is the inequities as it relates to Black and brown students. We see that with the digital divide. But legislatively, you can't, it's more than just throwing money at the situation. We have to be able to sustain some things. So when we talk about poverty, we have to be able to address that, because it's not just an educational issue. We can throw devices at it, but throwing a device at a student, just giving the student the device, and the student doesn't have internet access, that really doesn't help the situation. So we have to be able to address those things, and how we hire teachers make sure teachers are trained to address those things. But if we don't do those things, it comes back to the first question about black male teachers. Maybe there's a way legislatively that we can set money aside for districts to hire those individuals at a higher rate. So if I am I'm in IT, so if I retire and I want to become a teacher, but I don't have a teaching certificate, is there another way for me to get that certificate based on my experience? So we have to look at those types of things. Once we can do that, I think we can address a lot of these issues.
Thank you. All right, our next question, which has a major impact on a city and impact, obviously, a city predominantly of color, black and brown people here in the city of Paterson, the census, Mayor. The completion date for the census has been rolled back to September 30th. What is the city doing to get the count up, and what is our current count rate? And Assemblywoman Sumter, I know you want to chime in on this also, please.
I was just going to reference her. I was just having this conversation with the Assemblywoman. We had a very aggressive and ambitious plan prior to the pandemic. Data shows that the hardest to reach demographic group to count, children between the ages of 0 and 5, and we started getting into the schools and we started doing pep rallies, and we created a children's book called We Count, and we were going to place kiosks in churches and other places where people congregate. We couldn't do that because of social distancing. However, sadly, Assemblyman, only to date, less than 50% of Patersonians have filled out the form. That means 50% of us are not counted. That means we're going to get half of the resources we should get. So today I had a call or a WebEx with pastors, and they're going to designate September 13th, Census Sunday, to help us get out the count. I've been going door to door in the wards where we've seen the lowest response rate, the 1st, the 4th, and the 5th. We're handing out masks to remind people. I think there's a utility to that, dual purpose. Protect yourself and make yourself be counted, right? Make sure you get counted. So we're going to do everything we can without interacting as much with people. The schools are closed, so we can't do it. The superintendent was a partner, so was the board president, but we just can't do that. But what we can do is just continue on social media, in the newspapers, whatever outlet is, to keep talking about the census. And it's important that nonprofit organizations, faith-based organizations continue to emphasize the message, because we had until October 31st for the completion date. It was just rolled back to September 30th. Now we have fewer than 7 weeks to at least get beyond 60%, which was our response rate in 2010. And if we're able to increase the response rate by just 5%, that could mean $15 million more for Paterson.
Assemblywoman.
Thank you. So, folks at home, you can go to www.census.gov and complete your census online. It takes you 5 minutes. www.census.gov. Please go to that website. You can complete it online. This makes the difference in money for public safety. It makes the difference in money for our schools. It makes the difference in money for food securities, and it makes the difference in money for housing. These dollars matter. As we know, with this pandemic, the state of New Jersey has 1 million people unemployed. We just heard the number of 30% of Patersonians are unemployed. We don't want people on the street, homeless, and we don't want people suffering who don't need to suffer. If we talk about quality of life issues, this is something that each of us can do independently to help our city get the vital funds that they need. And we send more money per capita to the federal government than any other state in the country. So this is money that is ours, but we have to take an action step by completing the census, and it doesn't cost you anything but a little bit of time to get it done. Thank you, Assemblyman.
All right, thank you. And we have a couple of more questions before we go to our audience, but this question is very relevant, and unfortunately, this has been a situation nationwide when it comes to many urban cities, gun violence. And this is for any of our panelists, but the direct question was, what are we going to do in the city as far as a crisis intervention team and people that look like the folks on the street work with these families in the city of Paterson?
Senator?
Yes, you could take it first.
So I want to give credit to Casey Melvin, because Men Stand Up right now are holding street conferences, and he's here because I believe he's participating in the next forum. They have been holding these street conferences where we've seen gun violence occur. So they're actually taking the message to where this is happening. And I'll give them credit. I think today they're on Oak, one of the locations. Every Thursday, starting at 5 o'clock, and then 6:30, whenever the first session is over, they take it to the next corner. That's exactly what is needed when you have a community-based organization with credibility that's going out in the community and talking about how senseless violence has no place anywhere in Paterson. Because, Councilman, like I stated before, we cannot police all our problems away. We can increase presence, but the presence that matters the most are people who are trusted on the streets with the credibility, like Men Who Stand Up, hosting these street conferences regularly, every week.
Thank you. Zelly, you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I'll definitely add on to what I was saying earlier, that while the Men Stand Up initiative is doing great work, in order to do even more exceptional work and have even larger impact, they need additional resources. They need adequate funding. The work that they're doing right now is so important, but they could do so much more. I think the question was asking about crisis intervention teams. At this point in time, they have the capacity to do, these street corner rallies, which is phenomenal work. But they're all doing that on a volunteer, pretty much basis. If they was able to pay staff and have staff from credible messengers, they'll be able to pay these credible messengers from off the street to do the work that needs to be done, which is if there is a gun shooting, a violent shooting, they'll be able to directly go to that victim in order to prevent any type of retaliation at any time of the night. Right now, they can't do that type of work because it is just volunteer work, even though I know a lot of them still do it, even on a volunteer basis, but it'll be even more impactful if they get the resources. That's why I said so much earlier that they need not just $100,000 or $10,000, they need millions of dollars to be able to sustain this work, not just for a year, but indefinitely. And that's the work that we need to do, to look into our budget to make sure this is a permanent part of our budget. Because this type of work is urgent, and we need to have some urgency in order to save our lives.
Right. In Assemblywoman, in your professional career, your day career, you are a hospital administrator dealing with mental health. What is the mental health impact of the gun violence in our community? And Pastor, get ready because I'm coming back to you with the church impact and what you could do as far as the gun violence in our community.
Thank you, Assemblyman, for that. The trauma is sustained. When we have gun violence in our communities, it's not just one and done. It's just not that shooting occurred on this date and we move on. Unfortunately, time moves on, but the healing has to begin, and we do look to our faith-based communities, we look to our families, we look to our social networks to carry the burden, which is priceless, right? There's not enough funding to support that burden that becomes generational trauma, and violence begets violence. In the Assembly, when we talk about legislation, we've determined that violence is a public health crisis. It impacts every facet of wellness, not only mental wellness, but physical wellness and health of our communities. We're 8.4 square miles, and we have shootings at the volume of a large city of Chicago. It's painful, and each killing lends itself to more pain that recreates a trauma that may have been experienced earlier. I urge us to work also with the prosecutor's office of Passaic County, who has crisis intervention teams. Also, our police officers have voluntarily been trained in crisis intervention, and we definitely need to put more money into the services of making sure people are trained, and partnering with our hospital, which is a trauma center, and also receive grant money to support us for the impact of violence in this small community where we know our neighbors. And lastly, we need to not be afraid to speak out. We have a responsibility as a community to be our brothers and sisters and our children's keepers. We have a responsibility to make sure at 3 p.m. or 3:30 p.m. they can play in front of their houses and not worry about bullets being sprayed, because there's an old rift between old people who have lived the life they chose, and our kids can't play safely, they can't walk to school, and then we're holding the police accountable for not stopping the shooting. We have to take some responsibility for our actions and make sure that we hold ourselves to a standard of safety. So please, it's important to me, it's important for the health of our community that we realize that some of the trauma and the pain we can avoid if we are our brothers and sisters keepers.
All right, and Pastor McWilliams, what is the church's role in the gun violence that we see here in the city of Paterson?
Well, I believe that one of the roles that the church can play in this, in addressing the violence in the city, is also calling to attention the spiritual dimension to this thing. We know that those who are believers, those who are in the faith, we believe that there's also a spiritual dimension to this, and we have to also address the impact that it has on our community spiritually. And one of the things that I try to do, and the leadership here tries to do, and I'm sure other pastors try to do, we have to seek to minister to the community in what might be more unconventional ways, more non-traditional ways. But I do know, when you minister to the church, I, as pastor, I speak to the community every Sunday. It's the community that makes up this church. So I believe that it's imperative on pastors to really call out the spiritual impact that gun violence is playing. I think it's also imperative that churches be part of that conversation as we begin to define what our community standards are. And I understand that churches have to be engaged with the community to really have a say-so in addressing what community standards. And when I say community standards, I mean, what are the standards that we as a community are going to hold ourselves to? I think churches need to be part of that conversation. Churches need to minister in a way that might not always be traditional. Sometimes we have to step outside of our comfort zone. I believe in the whole new wine for new wineskins approach, that we have to definitely look at many different ways. And I wish I knew all the answers, but the answer I guess I can say is to continue to challenge myself as pastor, continue to challenge the churches, this church, to really speak to the spiritual dimension of the spiritual impact of gun violence, and how we can continue to minister in maybe more unconventional ways, but with the same goal in mind, to try to bring forth healing.
All right, Commissioner Simmons, I know as a Patersonian, it's a concern for you as a parent, and obviously as a school board member. What would you like to address as far as gun violence and solutions?
So, just piggyback on everything that was just said so far, one of the things and I applaud the work that Men Stand Up do, but that speaks specifically to what the Assemblywoman spoke about, being our brothers' keepers, and making sure that our children can walk and play safely. One of the things that is being worked on now in terms of policy for the district is a policy that gives the superintendent the authority to partner with groups like Men Stand Up, so that we can find ways, maybe through some of our title programs, where we get to address violence prevention, not just in some pockets, but across the board, not in some schools, but every school, so that it becomes a regular program. But finding ways to address some of the issues like Zelly talked about, because these people are volunteering, but maybe through some title program, we can find money that helps to spread that message to all 29,000 of our students.
All right, thank you. And Superintendent, and we're going to wrap. We have like a couple of questions, then we'll get to the audience in a couple of minutes. But for the superintendent, how are we addressing the mental health needs for our students and when it's virtual learning? How are we dealing with that?
So when we open up on September 8th, we have a program where all of our students are going to be engaged the first 15 minutes in school in a mindfulness activity. And we also just received a grant for $250,000 for 4 schools to pilot a program about mindfulness, mental health, social emotional learning. We know that during this pandemic and why students have been home, many of them have suffered some type of trauma. And so we want to be sure that when they come back that we're able to address it and that we're be able to have some conversations with them about the virus. How did they feel during the virus? Maybe some of them have fear about what's going on. They may have lost a loved one. And so we have now put that into the curriculum, that will be happening every day, whether we're in school or whether it's virtual.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to address that?
dovetail on something the Assemblywoman stated earlier relative to hospitals. Last year, there was a grant available through the Attorney General's office known as VOCA, Victim of Crimes Act. So there were community organizations approached me about supporting the effort to apply for the grant. Paterson did receive the grant, and what does that grant call for? It's called hospital-based intervention. Very often, when a victim of gun violence is approached, it's usually a police officer, the first person that approaches them at the hospital bed, asking questions. But what if you had someone who is a specialist, a counselor, someone who specializes in mental health, so that we can help these individuals not become victims, get them in school, get them a job, get them some mental stability. So that's one of the things we're proud of, the hospital-based intervention grant. It hasn't gotten started, it was postponed because of the pandemic, but we will be pursuing that opportunity.
All right. Mayor, and this could go to anybody, but could be an educational question, but this is directed to the mayor. What are you doing? Are you working with the Bronze Heat and the Bronze Shield to recruit Paterson residents, and particularly men of color, to be police and firemen in the city of Paterson?
Yes, I am. In fact, over a year ago, I stood with Dalton Price and other members of Bronze Shields. Bronze Heat, we have Troy Ayers who's working on that end, so I collaborate with those individuals, and it is an effort that we hope will be successful. But yes, I am committed to it.
And do you have the numbers, the percentages? We talked about that last time. What percentage of the fire department and police department are African American?
Okay, so as far as the police department is concerned, it's roughly 15%. The fire department is a little under 20%.
And you said you're working with them as far as, I know with Lieutenant Price and different people, as far as working with them as far as promotions. So working with them on test taking and things of that nature. And I think that's a concern of the community. And I think you have a better community. And I think Zelly and other people, when you have your firemen and your police and your teachers living in your community, we probably wouldn't have many of the issues that we face right now. So at this time, we're going to go to our audience. You could come to either mic on either side. We just ask you to remain socially distant when you come up for your question. So at this time, you can make your way to the mic if you have any questions for our panelists. Jamie Bland, come on up. And anybody else, they can file right in behind if you have any questions on either side. And direct your question to the person, to the panelists that you'd like to ask the question, respond to your question. The mic, Jamie.
Let's take a sip there, wait until I finish. However, I actually don't have any questions. I just came with solutions. As I measure the movement, is that okay? Am I okay with that?
This, but, you know.
Okay. For those who don't know, my name is Jamie Bland.
Speak up into the mic, Jamie. You remember?
For those who don't know, is this okay?
Yes, you're good.
Okay. For those who don't know, my name is Jamie Bland. And I actually have been working under the City of Paterson Division of Recreation for the last 22 years. I think I came in with laptops and then moved on to just a well-rounded program called Jumpstart, working with the at-risk inner city youth. I actually was working in special ed, so I knew that if we didn't get involved with the inner city youth, it was going to one day be what you see it is today. Now, I'm not gonna say it's a disaster because this is my city, and I don't wanna kick my city's back in, but it's very heartbreaking to see it the way it is, and especially if you know that you have tried and you could see it coming. However, I worked as a YAP counselor and was on the Paterson Village Initiative about 1998 with Councilwoman Vera Ames and others. And I used to go into the homes, and what I would do was basically try to find resources and help the parents and the youth that had behavioral problems. Now, when I was doing that, I can say that there was no violence. There wasn't really any shooting at all. And actually, that program moved to another city and county. So Jumpstart has always been a model of other programs that I work. as a special ed instructional aide under Dr. Monroe at School 13, and also School 30 with Mr. Caramico. I was pushed to School 13 because I came in there like a batter ram. I was already kind of off the hook myself, living on 12th Avenue and being an at-risk inner city urban young lady myself. So what I did, I grew to love, I grew to have a passion to do what I do. And I started off just a job, I'm not gonna lie. I heard people in these, in the rooms of when we would sit in the teacher room talking about, oh, I'm not gonna have her next year. You know, it kind of sounded a little bit racist to me because these were people that weren't from here. But it was a lot of great teachers at the time. So I just didn't want to say this person is racist or not. But what I did find out is that it wasn't a lot of parents, and I was under Anna Taylor Farrow at the time. It wasn't a lot of parents that cared. They thought that we were supposed to be raising their children. However, I found out that that was a lie. So I'm gonna say to parents, you have to understand that recreation, that Jumpstart, that Men Stand Up is not here, in the Paterson Public School, is not here to raise your children. What we are here to do is be a great asset to you and your family's lives. What I need people to do is focus on what they need to do and do it. And if you don't know how as parents, just reach out and get some trainings. So what we're doing now, I go into the homes, and under the City of Paterson Division of Recreation, we don't have a lot of money, but Benji already knows, I'm gonna go out and I'm gonna do it anyway. If there is money to get, I might reach out because of a nonprofit that I also attached on to Jumpstart to help enhance recreation. But I shouldn't have to work so hard doing that because there are funds that are available for things such as going into the homes. There are funds that are available to actually partner with police and go in and work on a discharge planning. Everybody knows the kids that are in the warped areas and might have behavior problems. So let's target those kids before they come home and their feet hit the street. I need to see these kids have already a plan, a strategic plan before they hit the street. And now you want to say, oh, it's crazy out here. Of course, because you're waiting too long and you're not targeting the people that you know have the problems. So I also feel that mentors, I think that if people are going to wait until the money gets here, it's going to be worse next year. So we need to continue to work hard with a passion for change and hope and pray that God will help send this money directly to the hands and the people that really have the passion to do the work. I'm gonna continue to work. I don't have anything much, but I have my heart, my mind, my body, and my soul. And I'm very serious about this. I don't sleep at night, and a lot of time I bust out and cry. So I have contacted the C-Line Services and other counselors, Ms. Schaefer, that have been working with some of these young people during the pandemic. Every night I was having an hour of power, and that's for, and I'm not really scared, but I'm scared. I'm just letting you know that my anxiety wants to see everybody else care a little bit more. And we have to continue recreation.
Jamie, we have another segment. And with all due respect, if you just could wrap up at this point.
I never talk and I never come anywhere to even be seen or heard. After this, I will not be back. Okay. But I just want people to understand it's a little bit bigger than the money. I need to see people working hard. Here are some of my youth that grew up in the program. They are now 15. I had them at the age of 8 and 7. So they have some questions to ask. But I think that because they have jobs now, and I'm going into my pocket helping them along bringing them along. Recreation needs more money to even hire more young people, because that keeps them off the street, whether you think so or not. You can look at their hair and think maybe they're out there in the street, but they're not. I had to actually pick them up from some of their jobs and meet them at their homes. Their parents and me have a good relationship because they're my family. So when you talk about working with youth, I'm not going to let you kick every one of their backs in. You got to put in some work whether you like it or not. And I hope that everybody is safe. I love you guys. I hope that you're safe. And during this pandemic, it is also a revolution. It is also crime that we are living every day right in our communities. You know, sometimes I'm still ducking on the floor. So let's continue to band together with every organization that has the passion, and let's get the job done. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie, and I'm sure you'll be back. And appreciate everything you do, but at this time, it's just time constraints. We're asking questions at this point. I appreciate, no, you weren't cut off. You were the keynote speaker tonight. We appreciate you. Thank you. Casey Melvin, you have a question? You have to love Jamie Bland. She works for me, so I appreciate it, but here, yes. Yes.
Yes, thank you, Assemblyman. I have a question regarding job opportunities and training. And this question, I guess, goes towards everybody in the panel, because at one point, you guys can all chime in on the issue. During our anti-violence initiatives and our street conferences, and even conversation with young individuals, when we offer them services and assistance, the number one question always comes to us is always regarding job opportunities, not only with jobs, but entrepreneurialism and employment, right, to the point where they can be contractors, right? So, and this came up, this is not the first time, but it also came up during my campaign, like that the city of Paterson, between the Board of Education and the municipal government, we spend over close to $1 billion, right? Close to $1 billion. What is the municipal government and the Board of Education doing in regards to creating guaranteed job opportunities for residents? And I'm not talking about, just by title alone, because we always hear the pitch about we're going to employ a certain amount of residents if these contracts are agreed upon. Now, we've saw millions of dollars being spent on road construction, and I personally, Assemblyman, walked through some of these construction sites for road resurfacing, and I couldn't find one person from Paterson working, right? They posted a video of a school site being developed, and I asked, how many residents from Paterson are going to be employed by way of this contract? We spend millions, and I can't name any company, any entrepreneur, any group of individuals who are unemployed who are being employed by these projects. So is there anything on the table of substance that's guaranteed that will assure us that our residents will get their first option to not only bid on these contracts, but give them training as well as employment? Because I don't see it happening. Everything is going to outside contractors, from my observation. If I'm wrong, I would love to be corrected, but is there anything on the table for Paterson residents to be employed by these millions of dollars, millions, that are being spent in our city to empower them, employment-wise and entrepreneurialism and training?
All right, so we'll ask the mayor and the superintendent to answer, and then the school board president.
Thank you, Casey. So I created a position, Deputy Mayor of Labor and Workforce Development. That Deputy Mayor is Benny Cook. First thing he did was create an apprenticeship program, and he was hosting apprenticeship training and testing at the college. Unfortunately, the pandemic hit and he couldn't do as much as he had done in the past, but we're looking to revive that with the number of projects, the developmental projects Paterson is going to undertake in the coming days. So he is someone that is a resource in our community. He himself was heavily involved in labor unions, so that's why he was my choice to lead up that new position of labor and workforce development. And we're looking forward to more training, testing, and apprenticeship programs under his leadership within the administration.
Have you put requirements in for these projects, be it housing or roads, that they have to hire a certain amount as I know Benny Cook knows you can request that you have to hire
Yes.
a certain amount of
And he's been
Patersonians.
influential with that, with projects that we have.
Could you get us those numbers, like
I will get it for you.
percentages wise?
Yes.
Superintendent?
So, thank you for the question. We were told, and just want to check with the board president from SDA, that the Paterson residents will be hired to build the new Union Avenue school. So I think that's something that we're going to have to look into. The other thing, the board, just I guess last week or 2 weeks ago, we had a conversation around a minority set aside. When you give out a contract, that you put a certain amount of money set aside so that we could hire Paterson residents. I know the president probably talked more about that.
Right. And so we're looking at minority set-asides in terms of, because one of the things you spoke about is contracts, right? So we're looking at a minority set-aside program where minority-owned businesses or minority and women-owned businesses can get a certain amount of those contracts, whether it's construction or cleaning or anything like that. So that program we're working on putting the language in place. The other thing, I just had a conversation yesterday with General Counsel about that very apprenticeship program. And so we're looking at putting language in contracts so that when bids are awarded, those paid apprenticeship programs, those paid apprentices must come from this city. So that's what the board has been doing. That's what we've been working on all year, basically. It would have been further until the pandemic came along. But we've now just gotten focused on that again. We want to make sure we put those things in place and make sure that minorities are bidding on contracts, are able to bid on contracts. We're making sure that we are training minority-owned businesses on how to bid on contracts and that bidding process and how that works, and making sure that they understand that they have to have a certain level of insurance and things like that. So we want to make sure the Board of Education does its part because we want to make sure we are the second largest employer in the city. We want to make sure we continue to employ Paterson residents, but not only employ them, but empower them.
And Superintendent, this is one that came in I thought was really important for our viewing audience to know. Is anyone or department assigned to safely do home visits to check on students during the pandemic and homeschooling? And people don't understand that we have so many suicide attempts, we have abuse, we have all types of issues, and the mayor may also be involved in this, but are we doing anything as far as wellness checks in the city for students?
Yes, we are. So any student that we had not been in contact with since March, and we were doing this all along, and it's now even in our restart plan. If there's no contact made at all, we're sending our security folks. We were working closely with the police department, and they were helping us out as well, but when they're too busy, then our security folks go out and do the wellness checks at the home.
Thank you. Mayor, you have something to add to this?
The most vulnerable part of our population are senior citizens. So early on, we worked with supermarkets to make sure they had exclusive hours to shop. But then we took it a step further because a lot of the seniors didn't want to leave their homes. So we implemented a program known as Neighbor Express, where people volunteer to deliver the groceries to the seniors. Today, we're proud to announce we expanded the program for single mothers with infants, and now we're also going to have high school seniors in Paterson do wellness checks for these seniors as well. So the school district's got the students as far as wellness checks. We have the senior citizens that we want to check in on as well.
Zelly, as a classroom teacher, you'd like to weigh in as far as wellness checks and the challenges of distant learning with your students?
The remote learning has been an extreme challenge to not just myself, but my students, and I know their parents as well. It's been a challenge to all of us because it's just not a matter of us being isolated from one another. It's the fact that because we live in a predominantly community of color, that majority of us know someone that has passed away because of COVID-19. I have students who lost grandparents and parents because of COVID-19. And it really hurts my heart that I'm not able to comfort them or support them during their times of need. And the most difficult thing about this is that we know that there's not only a digital divide, but it's also a racial divide when it comes to the educational gap. And then what is the educational gap going to look like if we continue to do this remote learning for another year? We all know our kids are already behind, So what does giving our kids paper packets for another 2 months or 3 months, or continue to have our kids try to discover how to do remote learning, how's that going to impact our kids? And if our kids are going to be impacted by it, what is that going to look like to our future crime rate, our future poverty rate, and their ability to succeed in life?
All right. And the last question, I don't know how accurate this is, and you could answer if it's incorrect or correct. Why is the Board of Education proposing that Juneteenth only be recognized for a half day?
So when the policy came forward, there was extensive conversation around the holiday and what it means, around Juneteenth and what it means. What we didn't want to do was just have students, give students a day off. So what we decided was that it would be a half day for students, but that half day would be learning about social justice, about history, African American history, but also the other half of that day will be for teachers to get professional development on the same thing. So there's a lesson that has to go into it. There's a lesson plan that has to be shown to the board before we actually get there. But that's the purpose. We didn't just want it to be a day where we just got a day off of school. We wanted to be some learning about Juneteenth and what it means.
Thank you. That answers the question. And we're going to wrap up and let you guys summarize, but I'm going to give you a name, and I want you to summarize in 1 minute the meaning of that main name, what it means to you. And I'll start off with the mayor, George Floyd.
George Floyd was a victim, but he also serves as a symbol for all of us to be aware of the fact that racism has been a virus in our country for 401 years. And so it's unfortunate that he lost his life, but he did not die in vain, because all of us can learn a lesson based on that tragedy. And I feel like now we've become even more conscious of it, but it's more than just being aware. We have to act. We have to act on it as well. And within our police department, we're conducting an audit to look at every policy, every procedure, every practice. Our police officers are going to start wearing body cameras in the fall. When the Attorney General issued a directive to look at the disciplinary records of police officers in the past 20 years, I was the first mayor to support him in that endeavor. So that is what we can learn.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Mayor. Zelly, Breonna Taylor.
Breonna Taylor. When I think about her, I think about so many other black women who have been victims of police violence, whose names we don't know. We have something called Breonna Taylor's Law, which was passed, and even though the officers who were responsible for her death have still not been arrested or charged for her death. I think Breonna Taylor's death pretty much symbolizes the status of where we're at right now in this movement, where there's so many people who have been victims of police violence and their perpetrators are walking the streets freely. And we need to, as a city and as a nation, to act more urgency to be able to hold people who do harm accountable, regardless of their race, regardless of their jobs. But anyone who does harm needs to be held accountable. And I hope that the city of Paterson is able to recognize that black lives really do matter and that they need to step it up, because from my point of view, they're not doing enough.
Thank you. Assemblywoman Kamala Harris.
Kamala Harris is a beacon of hope, the restoration of the heart and soul of America, so we can get back to leadership who understands the Constitution and understand that we are the people and we will represent people and care about life and know that the health and wellness of the country will in fact drive the economy.
Thank you. Superintendent, Black Lives Matter.
What Black Lives Matter means to me is that the social injustice has to stop, and it has to stop now. I think it's risen to a height where now we see action taking place. When I think of Black Lives Matter, I think of the children that I'm in charge of each and every day, what they see, what they may be subjected to. Some of our black males at the high school level, may be stopped just because of the way they're dressed or the way their hair is or something they're wearing. And so it's time that the social injustice stops. And I think the momentum is here for all of us to be part of that movement. Just want to say that in the district, we're starting a social justice advisory board where students are going to have an opportunity to come and speak to us about any type of social injustice that they've experienced with no ramifications. They can do it anonymously, they can do it in person if they'd like, and then have an opportunity for us to talk about what we can do to help them.
Thank you. Pastor, the Honorable Congressman John Lewis, late John Lewis.
I think what he symbolizes is persistence, determination, activism. He symbolizes a motivation. He did not yield, he did not stop. He put his body on the line, he sacrificed. His life was dedicated to the upliftment of his people. And I think the lesson that I am going to learn, and I think the lesson we can all learn, is that sometimes getting into good trouble is necessary to move a nation forward. And I think that in the city of Paterson, there has to be a good number of us that are going to be willing to get into good trouble so that we can move this city forward so that it is more equitable for all the residents of Paterson.
Thank you. Commissioner Simmons, Colin Kaepernick.
A fighter, someone who stands for what he believes in, no matter what the consequence, sacrificing his livelihood. Those are things that, my son plays football, and we talk about it all the time. And he talks about how people were against him, and I explain to him constantly that you always have to stand for what you believe in, no matter what the consequence, and you have to be prepared to suffer that consequence. And I think that, even as an elected official, a school board member, it's the same thing. So when we stand for the things we believe in, I have to be prepared to suffer the consequence.
Thank you. I want to thank all of our panelists. There are 2 segments to this. So to our young people who are in the audience, we'd like you to stay and ask questions in the second part because we've had panelists who've been waiting to get on for this part. So guys, just stick around. We're going to have a brief intermission. We want to thank each and every one of you for coming out and sharing your knowledge and your thoughts and, more importantly, your prayers for the city of Paterson and our nation as we continue to heal. God bless you, and we'll be back in a few minutes.
Are you listening? You gotta keep the faith, oh my. Oh, the hurt that hinders, it will fade away. Yes, it will now.
But I know someone who will comfort you. And when your hope is gone, he will bring you through. I believe. Take a chance from me. Just put it all in God's hands. Put it in His hands. I believe He will. I believe we can.
God has not given us a spirit of fear, but a power and love and a sound mind. Come on.
Famine and diseases, yo, they plague our land today.
comfort you.
And when your hope is gone, He will see you through. Yeah. If we come together, let's make a difference, y'all. I believe we will. I believe that we can.
I believe we can, yeah.
Now, I don't know about you, but I believe in a God who could use this. I believe the children's still the future. I believe a God who renews us. I believe if He parted seas, this disease gotta bow to the ruler.
So many young constantly dying from the hand of disease, taking breath from their bodies alone. It's time to let them see, and we can make it if we can see. There will be better days if we just believe.
Hope's not gone.
So keep holding on.
Yes, we have to keep the faith.
That one day we'll see the world be free. If we come together,
If we, I believe that we can. My God, my God. Stay together, work together.
take that trust from man and put it in God's hand. Let's embrace one another.
I'm looking for when it's gone. No matter where you're from, you got to believe it, yeah,
Together we stand, divided we fall.
Thank you, Jesus.
Let's represent Jesus. I believe we will.
If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, I will forgive their sins and heal their land. For their young sister in South Africa, for their young brother in Nigeria, for my brothers and sisters in New York City, God is still in the healing business. Let's come together.
This is really my heart. This song really reflects the way I feel.
Oh, yeah. My, 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 my. People get ready. There's a train a-coming. You don't need no baggage. You just get on board. All you need is faith to hear the diesels humming. You don't need no ticket. You just thank the Lord. So people get ready. There's a train to Jordan, picking up passengers from coast to coast. Faith is the key. Open up the doors and boredom. There's hope for all among those who love the most. Oh, hear the diesels humming, and you don't need a ticket. You just thank the Lord one more time. People get ready. There's a train a-coming. You don't need no baggage. You just get on board. All you need is faith. You don't need no ticket. You just thank the Lord. Come on, people get ready. All you need is faith. All you need is faith. You don't need a ticket. You just thank the Lord.
We just want to get right into where we're going, so I'm going to ask our panelists to introduce themselves, starting with Council President.
Council President Flavio Rivera, thank you for the opportunity to be part of this forum. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jerry Spezial. I'm the Public Safety Director here for the City of Paterson Police Department and the Fire Department and Office of Emergency Management. And I am proud and glad to be here tonight.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Casey Melvin. I'm a lifelong Paterson resident, entrepreneur, a member of the Brothers Organization, and I'm here to represent on behalf of the Paterson Men Stand Up Anti-Violence Initiative, in which I am the manager.
Good evening. My name is Dr. Latoya Gaines. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist in both New Jersey and New York, and I have a private practice, Culture of Wellness, which specializes in providing mental health counseling and psychological assessment to children, teenagers, and adults.
Good afternoon, Paterson. My name is Darius McDowell. I'm a recent college grad, George Washington University. Good afternoon.
Good evening, Paterson. My name is Dalton Price, president of Bronze Shields of Passaic County, where we influence the hiring of minority officers for the city of Paterson, and we track their progress through the city of Paterson and throughout the county. I'm also the first vice president of the Paterson chapter of the NAACP, where we financially support and make sure that Men Stand Up have the support from the community. I'm also one of the teachers, instructors on staff for Passaic County Police Academy, where we're now pushing an initiative for a block of instructions that includes addressing police officers and changing the way that things are being done in policing and the way that officers are being trained on a daily basis. And the most important part of that block is making sure that we push the white paper on the 6 pillars of community policing, which is 21st century policing.
Thank you. Let's get right into the questioning. Director Spezial, the first one is for you. Can you please explain the role of community policing in the city of Paterson? Many people think that it's patrols, but it's really about community engagement.
Community policing in the city of Paterson, which Lieutenant Price was a major component of, as well as Lieutenant Eason. And community policing is more about building partnerships with the community, doing anti-violence rallies, coupling with the kids in the community, the men that stand up, all of those components that deal with building partnerships, building trust, and building legitimacy between the Paterson Police Department and the community that we serve. And I can honestly tell you that under
his leadership and her leadership, they do a phenomenal job. They really, truly do. With the resources that they have, they do a tremendous job. And that's what community policing is all about. It's about building trust, building legitimacy, and making partnerships with the community so that we all can work together as one.
Thank you, Director. Lieutenant Price, the next question is, I know you're the Vice President of the Paterson NAACP branch, and the question is, what are some of the things that the NAACP chapter in Paterson is working on with the unrest in the city? What are you doing to address it?
Well, like I said, one of the things that we're doing is we're supporting people and organizations like Men Stand Up. We're having constant conversation over what can we do to make a difference, to find out where we're needed. And that's a very important part of the conversation. In order to help someone out, you have to find out what do you need and how can I help. So there's always conversation about things that can be done so that the organization can have more of an input and impact on the community.
Thank you. President Rivera, Council President Rivera, as the president of the City Council, is the City Council working on any projects to bring the city together in the racial unrest that we've seen due to George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and the Black Lives Matter here in the city of Paterson?
Honestly, the council is not working on such a measure at this time, but we are trying to address other matters to alleviate the things that are going on in the city. Director here, Director Special to my right, we have been in conversations to install body cameras also on police officers, just to make sure that, you know, the community feels a little bit more comfortable, you know, dealing with the police officers, and at the same time, it protects the police officers from any accusations also at the same time. But at this time, we don't have such a measure at this time.
Thank you very much. Casey Melvin, can you elaborate a little bit more on what Men Stand Up is doing here in the city of Paterson?
Yes, thank you. So the Paterson Men Stand Up Anti-Violence Initiative, pretty much, Assemblyman, is a call to action. It's a call to action primarily to the male figures in our city. You know, for quite some time, the women have been doing a phenomenal job on, you know, taking care of the family and being frontline when it comes to all the issues that relates to family, especially during the times of trauma and gun violence. You know, we see them at the funerals, we see them preparing for the funerals. They're the ones who appear to hurt the most. So, you know, we just thought it'd be important that the male figures in our communities take the first frontline step and first line action to address the violence head on. In most situations, as we know, we're at some point or another connected to the individuals who are the perpetrators as well as the victims of violence. So the Men Stand Up are actually took front and center to address the violence head on, whether it be to talk them out of retaliation, to find out what is the cause of their anger, their frustration, and utilizing methods that we've implemented in the past to make us successful. We transfer that information to those young individuals. So in short, the Men Stand Up Anti-Violence Initiative is we're doing anything and everything we can to mitigate, eliminate gun violence head on.
All right, thank you. And Dr. Gaines. Dr. Gaines is Paterson born and raised, always proud of her. Dr. Gaines, we talked to the superintendent and the mayor about the psychological impact of COVID-19 and the racial unrest in America. Can you talk to us a little bit about that as far as the psychological impact that it has, in particular in our young people?
So given the high incidences that we're seeing and being exposed to it through various different forms of media, a lot of what happens is we don't have a place to deal with the feelings that come up about what we're seeing. And what happens is the first thing that we feel is anger, right? We feel the anger and the rage, but anger is a secondary emotion, which means it's easily accessible, it's on the surface. And a lot of times what we don't deal with is the more difficult feelings that are underneath, including the helplessness, the hopelessness, the despair, the disappointment. And so that's why therapy is really important, because it's a place for you to establish a relationship with someone who can be empathic to those emotions, validate those emotions, because a lot of times those things are not validated by the greater society. We're made to feel like, these things don't matter, right? Which is part of why we have this Black Lives Matter movement. So it's important to deal with those deeper level emotions and then learn ways to cope. A lot of times we don't have adequate resources, internal resources, to cope with what we're seeing and what we're exposed to. So it's really important for us to begin to take mental health really seriously so that we can develop those skills to be able to move forward.
Thank you, Dr. Gaines. And we've been asked that when you do answer, if you could lower your mask so you could speak into the mic. They're having difficulty hearing you. To our viewing audience, please don't remember, you could go to Christ Temple's Facebook page to ask questions, or you could go to wimberleyevents@gmail.com to get questions in. Our next question will be for Darius McDowell. We talked to our first group of panelists about this, the impact of gun violence in the city of Paterson. Being born and raised here in the city of Paterson, how has it impacted your life? And in particularly, you have friends, you have relatives who have been, victims or been on the other side of gun violence.
Well, first and foremost, I would say it's extremely difficult when, you grow up in a city, you go out of town for college, and you go on Instagram, and you see someone you play basketball with, someone you play football with, and you see RIP associated with his name. So it's a different type of trauma and mental toll on you, having to go to someone's funeral, having to talk to friends who don't have enough food in the cabinet, having to talk to friends, how do you deal with another colleague dying, and not just dying from a natural cause, but dying from murder. So that takes a mental toll on you and definitely can affect on your outlook on the community and how to move about yourselves in Paterson.
Thank you. And Lieutenant Price, basically the same question, the impact of gun violence here in the city of Paterson and nationwide in many of our urban centers.
Well, it has an impact on everyone. The trauma that's associated with the violence, there's unintended victims. And these are not the folks necessarily that are killed or injured. They're the neighbor next door who has to change the way they live their life because of the trauma that goes on in the city. Something goes on at night and a young kid comes out of the house to go to school and they see crime scene tape or they see gauze bandages on the sidewalk. That has a trauma on a whole community, even those who haven't lost a loved one. But this travels throughout our city, so it has to stop.
Thank you. Director Speziel, the city is familiar with many of the hotspots, and Council President, you may want to chime in this also. How are we addressing the hotspots where we have frequent shootings and quality of life issues in the city of Paterson?
Excuse me. What we are doing is we are using, I don't want to give all of the information.
What you can give us, yes.
Please understand that. But what we are doing is we have a number of law enforcement professionals that are sporadically sticking together, going to locations, using evidence-based policing data, getting to a location, getting out, walking, which is a thing called Coper's Curve for 12 to 15 minutes, going to the next location, doing the same thing, having this omnipresence in these locations. Where we are short is in technology, the cameras, things of that nature, but what we are doing is using the omnipresence of police officers, not a heavy-handed approach. This is an approach to be out there, to be seen, to be visible, again, to know who's on the corner, to talk with people, not to go out and search people or, rough people up. This is about that partnership that I talked about. And I have 2 teams that do that, and they are out there 7 days a week throughout.
Thank you. Council President, would you like to weigh in on the hotspots?
Sure. As a councilman, we legislate, and at the same time, we actually approve the resources or make the resources available for things to happen. We had a recent conversation, and I'm not going to get into the details also, but we spoke to the director, and we do have a plan in place. And also, I believe my council colleagues, we will have that plan maybe by January where we're gonna allocate funding through the capital budget to make those resources available. So that's what we're doing at this time.
Thank you. Thank you. Casey Melvin, as a street soldier, we all know the hot spots in the city of Paterson. Any recommendations you want to add when it comes to the main, 17th Ave, 10th Ave? I mean, the usual spots. I mean, what would you say as a guy who knows these guys on the street, who knows the players? Anything you'd like to add to this?
Yes, Assemblyman. The thing that crosses everybody's mind in regards to our street team is the availability of job opportunities. I don't think that there's no other areas in the city of Paterson that stand out like certain sections of the 1st and 4th Ward. To me, these are like hubs. These are breeding grounds for crime. And the sad part is that historically, if there was a shooting to happen in Paterson, you can name 3 of the locations of all the major locations between 2 wards, the 1st Ward and the 4th Ward. We believe that there's not enough being done regarding the allocation of resources. Job opportunities, you see it right in front of you. Home ownership opportunities, you got people in these areas paying $1,500 and over $1,000 in rent. Never afforded the opportunity to be a homeowner. If a person has the opportunity to own a home, the training and the resources to own a home, that community can change overnight because they're property owners now, and they're less than likely to receive job opportunities by way of the city, as I asked a question earlier about, the jobs. I mean, I've talked to a group of people right in Montgomery Park, and I talked to them about how would you feel if you knew somebody who had $20 million right in your neighborhood, and they all said, they would try to get the $20 million. I said, well, the city had a $20 million road paving contract, and nobody responded. And that's a problem. I think those hot spots are intentional. They could be changed if government puts aside their differences, they stop thinking about themselves, and not only talk about, but put some effort behind some of these policies, because we spend too much money for our city to look like this. Over $1 billion, Assemblyman, passes through our city in 12 months. There should be no unemployment. So I think it's an issue of poverty that's leading toward this violence.
Thank you. Dr. Gaines, the impact of COVID-19 we talked about and the racial unrest, what is the psychological impact of distant learning for many of our students here in like Paterson and urban cities that may not be getting the help they need? What would be the impact in the long run, you think?
So I think what we're going to see are higher rates of anxiety, higher rates of depression, and to an extent, maybe some post-traumatic stress. And the reason for that is because, number one, we're dealing with 2 things that are pretty unpredictable, right? We have this virus that's running its course, and it impacts everybody differently. There's no way to predict what it's going to do, and so that threatens our sense of safety. And also with the racial injustice that we're seeing, that also threatens our sense of safety. And so when we're dealing with distant learning, you're taking away for some kids their ability to interact with maybe one person who they know really cares about them. Since we've been in social isolation, we've seen higher rates of child abuse, we've seen higher rates of domestic violence, which also plays a part in the development of post-traumatic stress disorder as well. And so when we talk about the impact, and already as people of color, we do have higher rates of mental disorders in our communities, and so we're adding on another layer of that. And so it's going to be really important when we think about how to transition back to learning in person or even continuing in distant learning. How are we going to not only focus on education, but also focus on the social and emotional development and providing our students with adequate coping skills and adequate resources. In part 1, some of the panelists talked about wellness checks. So what do those look like? Are the people that are doing the wellness checks getting adequate training to be able to provide adequate psychological care? And so these are some of the things that we need to think about when, if we are going to continue with the distant learning.
Thank you. Lieutenant Price, you've made it clear that you've been a major part of recruitment of minority officers, men and women of color in our community. The city of Cleveland had a program for criminal justice for at-risk students, and many of those students later on became police officers, fire, men. What is your thoughts on early criminal justice education for our students?
Great question. The earlier you start, the better off you are. You're going to run into some youngsters who may have made some mistakes, but having a positive influence in front of them can help them to make the proper decision and clear up some things. Not necessarily becoming a police officer, but getting a job that they want and need. That's important that you get to that person as soon as possible and get them the resources that they need. If the police officers are in the school, you help to build that relationship. You help to add resources. If that young man decides, I like to do construction, I want to drive a bulldozer, you find the resources to get in front of him, and now that is that child's first opportunity to deal with a police officer, and it's very positive, and they're not going to forget it. So the better off you can, the sooner you can have these conversations with youngsters, the better off you are. And you can address some of the minor things that they may have done as juveniles. And you can address it and realize that this young man was 17 years old and he had marijuana in his possession. Can that be addressed? Can it be dealt with up front? We're not going to hide anything. Can it be dealt with up front that he made a mistake? So those are the kind of conversations you have to have, especially in a city like Paterson, because those conversations are being had other places about how do we help people who have made some mistakes. So we have to have the same conversations. We also have to work to keep our people straight. You have issues, you have anger issues, you live in a certain community. We're gonna help you out and teach you how to keep your driver's license together, how to take care of your warrants, how to go to court, how to act. We're gonna do all those things, and we've been doing that, and it helps, and again, the sooner, the better.
All right, Director, you wanted to chime in on that?
I did. Exactly what Lieutenant Price was talking about. What we need to do in raising that 15% and getting Paterson residents, we should be going through the high schools at the senior year and doing the applications with anybody that wants to become a police officer or a firefighter. Imagine if we did it in the high school, right when they turned 18 or right before they were going to turn 18, before that July or before they were getting out, and then getting them the training and the knowing how to take that civil service test. When our list came out, we would have nothing but Paterson High School's students that we would be able to load up with.
Thank you. I think City Council, I hope you're listening to that. I think that's an excellent idea, something that we can work with the Board of Education on, because we need more of us that look like us, serving us, living with us. And that brings it to Darius McDowell. Darius, you talked about this in our first town hall as somebody asking a question. How do we get our young people to not only stay in Paterson, but when they go away to school, come back, or if they go away to the military, come back to be our police, fire, teachers, architects, business owners? What do you think the barriers have been when you talk about the talent that has left Paterson and never has come back, that ends up in Atlanta, Charlotte, everywhere else, Maryland? How do we get them back? What do you do?
Well, first and foremost, I think we need to start with more economic development in the city. A lot of times we go out of state because there's more opportunities for our desired positions. So, you know, we may go to those Atlanta, DCs, because those cities cater more to our skills and we can make it a higher paying job. But Paterson holds up a unique position. We're extremely close to the city, and I feel that it's an attractable place for other companies that have satellite headquarters, such as Delaware, such as other cities that are close enough to New York, close enough to DC, but it serves as that middle point. So we can give people something to come back to, you know, a housing development that, you know, a lot of young college grads can come back to, you know, a nice community that people want to come and raise a family in. If we can give those people an incentive to come back, maybe, you know, student loan repayment programs. If you work in the city of Paterson, you go to school in Jersey, stuff like that. So if you give people motivation to come back in the city and, you know, programs, mentorship programs, because when you leave the city, you always want to take care of what's, like, you want to uplift people from your own community. If I learned a skill, it'll be kind of, and it'll be wrong for myself to go learn a skill and then go somewhere else where I can educate my own people so they can also step up to that scale and educate more people, and just spreading positivity, spreading education. So back to my my first point, just giving incentives for people to come back.
Thank you. Council President, this was from the mayor. He said that the council would be making a decision on removing the Christopher Columbus statues and placing them elsewhere, maybe in a museum, or giving them to a organization that would want them. What's the status of the Christopher Columbus statues being removed?
To answer the question, we need a little clarification, because we had a similar request from Black Lives Matter recently, where they were told, and Mr. Thomas was one of the panelists before this group, and I was, they were reaching out to me, asking me, when was the council going to act on the mural that you're planning on doing? And that's never been, we try to figure out, Council Vice President Lelisa Mim and I, what committee does that go through? Because that has never been the function of the council. So that is an administrative function. That's a decision that the mayor needs to make. And if I'm wrong, I hope that he could correct me, because I've only been on the council for 2 years, but I don't recall watching council meetings for 12 years. I don't believe that's a function from the council, but if it was a function, we would have that discussion and we would take the action that was demanded by the community. But at this time, I could not speak on the matter, because it's, from my understanding, it's not our function.
Okay, if you guys could get together and get a response to Black Lives Matter and to the community in general. This has come up in numerous conversations I've had. I spoke to the council woman who represents me now as at large and in the 3rd Ward, and I couldn't get an answer. So the mayor, we did ask earlier, and he did not give an answer. He deflected it to council.
So I assume this is the first I hear from this, although Councilwoman Mims did send I believe it was a memo regarding this matter. When Mr. Thomas reached out to me, it was clarified at the last council meeting, actually. It's televised that the function belongs to the mayor. I just want to clarify that.
That's fair. Director Spezial, and this was a question that we had in our previous town hall. What percentage of Paterson residents are on the police department and the fire department that currently live in residents of Paterson?
I would say we're probably somewhere, and I'm taking a guess on this, just from knowing the men and women, I would say we're probably 30 to 40%, maybe about 30% that live in the city of Paterson. The mayor had given out a number of 15% with the people on the job in the police department and 20% on the fire department. I would say out of that both, we would probably be somewhere around 30%. But again, if we want Paterson residents, we need to start early. We need to get these kids who want to be a police officer, who want to be a firefighter, in that high school with the same things that what we're getting is, we're getting people that are coming from out of town. They are coming here and renting an address, which is required. They rent their address, they take the test, and as long as they sit for the test while they're at that address, they move back to Wayne or wherever they want. They have to be hired by us. That's the state civil service system. So we get in front of this, and we get all of our seniors. We got it licked.
And Lieutenant Price, man, you have had numerous conversations about this. What do you think, how can we address people from out of town coming in, temporarily getting addresses, and become hired and move right back out, whatever the required time is for them to stay here?
Well, first of all, you have to take the fight to the people that are causing it. The state sets the rule. If we don't like the rule, we make the state change it, because it's not beneficial to our city. The state says you have to live in Paterson at the time of the test. If a person meets that requirement, there's not much the city council and the city of Paterson can do. Let's change that requirement. You change the requirement to say you have to live in Paterson a certain amount of time. The way the rule is set now, it excludes certain people. You can never live in Paterson, move here and take the test, and you cannot become a police officer. At the same time, Darius, who grew up in Paterson, went to school in Paterson, is a product of the city of Paterson. He moves out of Paterson tomorrow, he is no longer eligible to take the police test. There's something wrong with that process. So when we start to have these arguments among each other, we're fighting with the wrong people. We need for the state to change it so it can be addressed. And this is where the problem comes in. Take the fight to the people that makes the rules, and they're holding us back, and we need to address it on that level.
Thank you. Casey Melvin, what is your position for a police citizen review board?
A police citizen review board. I think that's important. I don't think that a citizen review board would hurt the situation when it comes to addressing issues of violence or police conduct. You always, I find it important that it's always good to get a neutral perspective on any situation. You know, it wouldn't hurt because the members of the community, if it's composed of members of the community, not appointed or selected members, but members who are somewhat familiar with the needs and wants of that specific segment of the community. I think that, especially right now in this day and time where a lot of the decision making is exclusive of the people who are affected by it. Countless times I've heard responses in regards to police conduct and police brutality, but yet we always get legislation that kind of misses the mark, you know. And I've, you know, no disrespect to what we're experiencing now, but I've been to about 8 Black Lives Matter rallies, and I've yet to see one person ask to make Juneteenth a national holiday, you know, but that's what we get. So if we had individuals who understand the issues, who know what they want, participate in these boards, I think the outcome of the police conduct, with teeth at that, you gotta keep in mind, they gotta have some type of authority, you know. I think the performances of officers moving forward would change dramatically.
Thank you. Lieutenant Price?
To Casey's point, when you have oversight, it helps anyone in their process. There's nothing wrong with oversight. And you have to understand what the Civilian Review Board's purpose is. And it is oversight. And they make recommendations to the police department and to, well, mainly to the director. There may be some things that aren't necessarily illegal, but the director looks at them and says, we have to fix this problem because the Civilian Review Board is bringing these things up. So these things have to be addressed, but there's training that goes into this. Learning the rule of law, learning if the law was broken or not. What is the policy? Does the policy need to be changed? So that's what it can do. It can help because it holds everyone accountable, which is an important part of the conversation. So when we start talking about that, you have to talk about it, like KC said, putting the right people in place, giving those people the proper training, and not just picking someone because I like them to sit on this board. There's no benefit. The Civilian Review Board is supposed to benefit the city. And if you're just picking people based on relationships, you're not benefiting the city. So it's very important that when this is done, not if, when this is done, it is done the right way so that it betters our city as a whole.
Thank you. Council President, would you like to weigh in on that?
Actually, it would be very important. I'm not going to undermine it. We always need oversight. As a legislator, that's what I'm there also, not just to legislate, but to hold the administration accountable. Because I believe that you need a plan, but you need to execute the plan. Many times we see that we get additional resources, but then we don't have a plan to put it to use. I'm not going to elaborate on that. Maybe I get an opportunity later on, but if we get maybe a question regarding to COVID, I'll elaborate a little more. Thank you.
Thank you. And you know what? And this is, I'm going to start off with Darius and Dr. Gaines and council, and anybody else could weigh in as we deal with the racial unrest here in America. Paterson is considered a major melting pot. I believe we're the second most densely populated state in the United States. We have 52 different nationalities and could be more, 77 different dialects. What can we do? And Council President, I'll start off with you. What can we do in particularly to improve race relations with African Americans and Latinos in the city of Paterson?
Well, we need to start at the top. We need to be more inclusive. We need to work together. A great example is recently when we had a discussion pertaining regarding the presidency. We were open to having anyone, the race matter never came up. And we have acted as a council the same way. Anytime we bring something up regarding the Bengali community, we have a consensus among the council. Same thing, recently, Councilwoman Mims brought up the recent holiday on Juneteenth, which we made it a paid holiday. That idea was sponsored by Councilwoman Mims, and again, there was no second thoughts. We need to be more inclusive because it's important to point out that's what makes us strong. We're a melting pot, and I actually learned that from you, Assemblyman. You was my coach, and we never saw one another differently. We always respected one another, and you treated us the same way. So we need to lead by example. That's what I meant by passing the last comment about the Assemblyman. We need to lead by example. Thank you.
And Darius and Dr. Gaines, would you like to weigh in as growing up in the city of Paterson and have neighbors speaking various dialects and different religions? How can we improve those relations here?
I think first and foremost, we need to understand how grateful we are for the diversity. You go around other places in the country, they can't go on one side of town, get some Mongolian food and go over there, get some rice and beans. That's something that's unique to the city of Paterson, and we should take great pride in that, because when you have so many different cultures come together, if we all come together as one and respect each other's cultures, respect each other's principles and values, then together we'll be unstoppable. Because you won't find another city like Paterson. You won't find over 30 different type of cultures compiled into one area. So we need to be grateful for the diversity and understand and take some time out to learn about another culture. Take some time out to learn, why is this holiday so important to this culture group? Why is this so important to them? Because that can move the envelope a long way.
Thank you. Dr. Gaines?
Yeah, I agree with Darius. I think it has to start when we're young. I think it has to be a joint effort both at home and within the schools to learn how to have respect for our individual identities. We talk about identities in terms of race and culture, but also that has to do with our gender. And so I think that if we can learn how to respect what those individual differences are and learn how to celebrate them, both when we're encouraged at home to, have those conversations with our neighbors, have backyard barbecues, do those things, and then also in the schools, learn about different cultures, have international food days, talk about the meaning of those holidays within the schools. I think it would do a lot, because when we talk about social development in terms of growing up into adulthood, I think it has to be a repeated thing. We have to be repeatedly exposed, and that's why, I like Darius's answer, because where else can you go to get exposed to the variety of cultures that we have in Paterson? So we need to take that as an opportunity to learn from each other and cultivate that respect.
Thank you. Council President, and anybody else can answer this, the digital divide, in particularly with brown and black children. What can we do as far as, I guess the question was, the care funds that are being, going through the county? Would you be willing to, or would you lead the charge of making sure not this child, but every household had Wi-Fi and access to a computer or a tablet?
I usually have a few words, but let me just extend myself just a little bit. I think this is important. Actually, the county, for those viewers, the county got an award of $87 million, which they made the first allocation, divided it between the 16 towns, and Paterson got over $8 million. I've been, I'm not gonna say just I've shared my a few ideas with the mayor, but we could have hired more, we could have hired a lot of our teenagers for delivery. The mayor mentioned previously that he has volunteers. We have $8 million, and most of the money have been used. Not most of it. The part that has been used towards overtime. I had an earlier conversation with the superintendent. We need to do more with that money, Assemblyman, and the county made it clear that as soon as we spend this funds, we could go and ask them for more, because the allocation to the county was $87 million, and the first allocation to the municipalities out of that money is $29. We are in some discussion. We started a discussion today actually with the superintendent. We need to see if we could use this funding to help out the schools, and at the same time, we need to meet with the mayor, because we could create jobs, decent paying jobs for our youth, and Assemblyman. if you submit a plan, let's see if we could do, we gotta spend this money probably by December if it doesn't get extended. Let's see if we could put some programs together where we could involve some of our youth. I know you're involved with our youth, and we definitely could do a lot with these funds that were provided, as long as we stayed, with the guidelines that have been provided. But I'm interested in having that discussion. Thank you.
Casey, you want to weigh in on those CARE funds? And as he stated, there's $8 million there now. And I know you've talked about, hiring folks and getting them jobs that are, living wages, not, when you got $8 million, you could pay somebody a living wage. Any impact, any statement you'd like to make on that?
I totally agree, and I think when that question came up before, I was kind of like surprised to know that the $8 million, more than half of that went towards overtime. Like overtime, okay. Was anybody at the table with an idea or at least an understanding or knowledge to design something to employ younger folk? That's $8 million is a lot of money that didn't affect our budget. This is additional funding. We always complain about being cash strapped. Well, here it is, a surplus of $8 million, and the majority of that was spent, on overtime. Within it's only been 3 months? 3 months, $8 million, $5 million, more than half of that being spent. And I still can't see none of my young folks out of the 11 sites that we went through during our street conferences. I don't know anybody who was employed with some of this money who received overtime payments. That's a problem for me, Assemblyman, and that's a serious problem. And again, that confirms my theory that the ghetto and these hot spots are by design because we've been neglected. We've been neglected. We need to reinvest some of those monies. If we have 29 million, you said the total, we should, right now, moving forward, develop some programs.
8 million now, and we could get additional.
But we didn't spend the entire 8, right?
No, you're right.
So with the few $1 million that we have left, our legislative body, county, please, let's have a conversation on how to use some of this money to employ some of our young folk, whether it be through training, whether it be through job implementation, remediation during the COVID crisis. Let's do something because it's bothersome to me. It's bothersome.
Thank you. And Darius, you want to weigh in on that, the impact of the CARES Act money?
Yes. So given the demographic of Paterson, New Jersey, COVID hit us hard. So when we transferred to virtual learning, as we come from a school district who's already underfunded and behind academically, this just widens the gap of the lack of education, the lack of resources. So to piggyback off of Council President, we spoke about how to get young people involved. We have a lot of young people who are recent graduates from college, people in high school who are extremely proficient at their tasks. So we can develop a tutoring program that we can pay the recent college grads, can pay those proficient high schoolers to tutor the grammar school students. We can hop on Zoom if you want to go to Eastside Park and have a group of 3 kids or so, a whiteboard. We have to think outside the box because we are in unprecedented times. So, regular thinking is not going to get it done, especially for a city with the obstacles that we have. We have to think outside the box, and we have to see how we can get our youth more involved because Algebra 2 is not that hard. If you go through college, you've taken calculus, you've taken capital markets. So learning and teaching Algebra 1 and 2 is not too hard. You can teach regular math to an 8th, 7th grader. And it definitely gives us this pride, a sense of dignity of you're giving back to your community. You're making sure that, we're paying it forward and doing what we can to get everybody ahead academically.
Dr. Gaines and then Lieutenant Price, I wanted the technology piece. How can technology play a part when you have $8 million to mental health and well-being checks? Can this be part of it? Can we use technology when it comes to mental health?
Absolutely. So right now, a lot of mental health professionals are using telehealth through platforms such as Zoom or other HIPAA-compliant software in order to maintain confidentiality. So telehealth can be used with children all the way up through adults. There are lots of ways that you can engage children through things like play therapy and teaching coping skills and teaching ways to deal with stress. And that is also applicable for adults as well. And so I think with, everything given the pandemic, I do think that telehealth is going to be something that's even more utilized than it was before. And I know there are other districts that have used telehealth to engage their students in mental health services. So I think it could be something that could enhance, what's already put in place.
Thank you. And Lieutenant Price, you're also a professor. the impact of technology and using funds like this as far as education, employment. What is your thought? What are your thoughts?
It is very different for me teaching remotely. I like to be in rooms like this, I like to have a conversation with people face to face. So when you take that away, it changes the conversation. However, this is what has to be done. This is the conversation we're having. And because of the things that we're dealing with now, like COVID, it exposed our country for what it is. When you find out that students in Paterson just do not have Wi-Fi, why is that? And how do we keep up with those things to make sure that we have it? So these are things that have been exposed. The digital divide is huge, and it shouldn't be. Everyone should have access to health care, of course. Everyone should have access to Wi-Fi. This is for children. And you have children in certain neighborhoods that can't receive these funds and these abilities, and it takes away from not just our city, it takes away from the country. Because the truth be told, when the tide rises, all the ships should float. And for some reason, we're not floating with the other ships because we're not giving access to the right things. So it is exposed for what the digital divide is and is not for our community.
Thank you. At this time, we're going to go to our community, our audience out here to ask questions. I ask you, we have mics on both sides. If you could come up and, like I said, if you could keep your social distance in between questions. So I know the guys, you had some questions earlier, and I apologize for the delay. Jamie's going to treat you guys to dinner after this, so don't worry about it.
Hello, my name is Cameron Brown, and my question for the panel is, why isn't the Emerson curriculum enforced, and why isn't it a mandatory part of our curriculum?
The Amistad curriculum, and you know what, our superintendent and our commissioner, our board president isn't here, but I know it should be implemented. I believe she answered that question in our first town hall. I think we could do a better job of implementing it. And along the lines of racial understanding, I think if people understood more about slavery, if they understood more about African American history, we wouldn't be in the situation that we are right now. You know, so this is something that as a young student, a high school student, are you a high school student?
Yes.
That you need to reach out during this teletime, and I will give you the superintendent's email address when we're finished here so you can address it to your school. And we do have to do a better job, not just in Paterson, but nationwide when it comes to the Amistad Act that hasn't been really implemented how it should be. So that's an excellent question.
All right, thank you.
Zella, you want to help me with this one? Hmm? Yep. Hmm?
I have a question for the director. Earlier, because we had this conversation, I honestly believe that the police do too much, right? That they do too much, especially when it comes to cities like Paterson. A lot of the residents have issues with the response time for the police, and mainly because the police are responding to so many different issues. And a lot of those issues, I don't think that the police should necessarily be responding to. Earlier, we talked about like car accidents. My personal opinion, for a lot of car accidents, we don't necessarily need like a patrol car to come, waste like 30, 40 minutes at that incident when it was like a non-violent like car crash, when that police officer could have been at another location doing something more important. What is your opinions about maybe like getting together with community leaders, the chief of police, to really analyze the functions of the police and really see like what roles are really necessary and what roles are not necessary, and what can we do as a city to say, you know what, maybe we could create like another institution or another job for those type of roles and activities to free up the time of the police officers.
As we had our brief conversation, there are roles in the police department. We've done health notifications, where we're taking police cars and we're going throughout the city back and forth with police cars, but yet someone is possibly being robbed and they're calling 911. That's something we could do without. When you have motor vehicle accidents, and what I was talking about is a motor vehicle accident where there's property damage, most of the time those people sit and wait for hours upon hours, because what happens is the priority of that system keeps knocking it down. Could someone else do it? Sometimes they have to come to the police department to do that report. Sometimes they have to go online and fill out a state form and do their own report. So yes, there are certain roles that could be modified. What I look at, it would make us more effective and more efficient in our policing abilities if we were to focus on core responsibilities. So I'm about core responsibilities in protecting and serving the public.
Thank you.
Thank you. Lieutenant Price is also going to answer. Zelly.
To your point, I agree that the police are responding to things that they should not have to respond to. But as a police officer, I'm going to respond. And when I get there, I'm going to do everything I can to help the situation, even though I'm trying to explain to you that I can give you a state form and you could fill it out, and you're telling me, I don't want a state form, I want a report. So I don't have to do the report, but for you to feel better, I kind of have to do that report. So while I agree with what you're saying, it's through education. We have to educate our community. When we start these changes, you have to educate the community that the police are no longer going to respond to accidents unless the car is undrivable, has to be towed, or there's significant injury to someone. So this can be done, but it takes education. Okay, we're not one of those towns. We don't have police officers responding to barking dogs and cats up trees, and our community knows that. But some of the things you're talking about, we're gonna have to educate the community that the police are no longer responding to this. And I know it may be an issue with creating new numbers, but creating new numbers for people to call for some of these things, 711, 811, whatever the case may be, but education between the police department and the community can get these things done.
Thank you.
I just wanted to add to Lieutenant, what happens in other states, you go across the border in Pennsylvania, you have a property damage only, the police officer's gonna ride up, and he's gonna see the two parties, he's gonna make sure that you guys ain't fighting, he's gonna make sure that you switch your information, and he's gonna give you your own form, and that's pretty much the way they do it. You know, but you have to realize there's also people, like the lieutenant said, that when you get there, they don't understand. They want that police officer to fill that form out, and they want it on that form, and they want your signature on it, and that's what they're accustomed to in this state. So that's what we are faced with in serving the public.
Thank you. Young man.
Hi, my name is Amir Johnson from the Jumpstart program. My question is, what are we doing about changing the curriculum to reflect the history of black and brown children in our district?
I'm sorry, guy. Yep, but you know, these are excellent questions, and I wish we could have gotten them for our superintendent. And this is something I know, Jamie Bland, I'm going to ask you to set up a time with these young folks, with the Eileen Schaefer, our superintendent, or Kenny Simmons, and we have to do a better job. I know growing up in Paterson, we knew all of our, you know, heroes, and I don't know if that's happening now. And many times that comes because they do not have a person of color that is teaching them. And, you know, grammar school, many kids will go all the way through high school and may have one African-American teacher or two. And it may not be that important to them. But there are also other people who are not African-American who do teach these things. I mean, Zelly, you're a teacher, and I just don't know how much time outside of February is being put into African-American history. And this is something, as young folks, we could sit down and talk about further. Would anybody else like to weigh in about the curriculum or African-American studies? No? Thank you. So guys, we're gonna set up something with Jamie, with you guys, to meet with Commissioner Simmons and the Eileen Schaefer, superintendent. Yes.
My name is Amari Gray, and I'm from the Jumpstart program also. My question is, why wasn't a real and true effort put forth so Paterson citizens and veterans could get the funds that HUD and the federal government...
Can you talk into the mic just a little louder, a little closer? Yep.
Why wasn't a real and true effort put forth so Paterson citizens and veterans could get the funds that HUD and the federal government earmarked for them?
All right. I guess Council President, you want to take a stab at that? It's more or less he's asking there wasn't a great effort as far as getting HUD funds for veterans and senior citizens. Was that veterans and senior citizens? What was there more of an effort put forth by the administration or council to utilize funds for veterans? I know we do have one veteran housing project, am I right?
So I'm curious, is this has anything to do with the latest article where some of the funding that was allocated for veterans projects was basically reprogrammed because I guess for many years this funds was not utilized for the purpose that it was intended at the beginning. All I could say is that as council members, and again, it's not pushing the blame. This happened. These funds were there since 2006. Just so you know, if it's related to the article, the recent resolution that we passed to reprogram those funds. So that is a question that we would have to ask those directors. Some of us only been there for 2 years on the council, but the only thing I could assure you is that, and again, it's a team effort, but we each bring some expertise to the council. I've been working with grants maybe for the past 14 years, and going forward, and since I've been there, all I've done is ask the questions and hold the administration accountable. But I could not speak for something that was not addressed for the past maybe 15 years. That's all I could. But I could guarantee you that going forward, the council is going to be mindful to make sure that the funds that are allocated for the purpose that they are allocated, they're going to be utilized. Thank you.
And many people need to know that many of our homeless and alcohol and drug users are veterans. And people need to understand that we as a legislator, including myself, as a state legislator and federal legislators, we owe our veterans more when it comes to housing, when it comes to counseling, when it comes to health care. And many of these people, if you have a conversation with them on the streets, you will be surprised that they have served their country. And unfortunately, we as elected officials in that country have failed them. So that's something, Councilman, that we all need to get better on, definitely. Mr. Bowles.
Surprising question here. Lamont Bowles, better known in this church that I was raised in as Trustee Bowles, but born and raised in the city of Paterson, and School 13, School 6, School 5, School 14, and JFK. I grew up with this saying that was put in my head from folks in the community and my family, and it went something like, it takes a village to raise a child. Well, that was one half of it. The other half is that if the kids that the village raises doesn't come back to replenish the village, then the village is going to dry up, okay? And won't be able to serve the kids that come after. I've been able, God blessed, to be able, even when I wasn't living and no longer living in Paterson, to continuously come back for years. 15 years, world's largest kids event, Easter egg hunt. 5 years, Christmas parties for all the housing projects, heavily decorated from the city of Paterson. 2 keys to the city from Mayor Barnes and Mayor Pasquale, Lamont Bowles Day in the high schools. But I wish the mayor was here also. I'm embarrassed right now at my city because the village that raised me, there were mentors and leaders, and some of them have become forgotten. One of the main mentors that kept pushing at me to keep giving back regardless of how much money I made, how many mountains I toppled, was a brother named Ed Cotton. And I ride around the city, I see murals of drug dealers. I see different streets named after folks that wasn't born here or didn't do things. Then nothing's done for this brother. We forgot about this hero in Paterson, Ed Cotton. Not good. I'm ashamed. I really am. That's all I got to say.
Thank you. And I know Councilwoman Mims, our Vice President of City Council, also looked at Ed Cotton as a mentor. Obviously, many people know that he's a cousin of mine and a mentor. And you hit the point. You know, and I had a conversation with an elected official today that many of our elected officials do not know the history of Paterson. And that's something that you almost need a crash course. They used to have a Paterson group where you learned about Paterson and who was in Paterson, who was the mayor, who did this. And many people do not know the Bill Masons or the Ernie Greens or the Eddie Johnsons, the Lamar Leftwiches. And those folks are the people who really did what, you know, Trustee Bowles just said. And the pastor, the religious history here. So people, we, meaning me, myself, and others, we have to ask people. You know, we welcome people from Bengali. We welcome people from the 52 different nationalities, but learn the history of Paterson, and you will have a greater appreciation for it. Young lady?
Hi, my name is Gianni Dixon, and I grew up in Jumpstart, and I just have a question. The question is, how does someone from Paterson that has been waiting for unemployment since March get assistance?
I know we've assisted people. I know you're getting a lot of calls in the city council. I don't know what kind of system you have up, but we work with government relations in my office, young lady. So if it's somebody that you know, they can reach out to our assembly office. I'm not sure if the council and the mayor's office is working with them. They are. And we work with government relations. Unfortunately, there have been 1.5 million claims, I believe, in New Jersey to date. As the mayor stated earlier, there's a 30% unemployment. And we know people personally that have not received any funds since March. My chief of staff is working every day on claims, and this system has proven to be broken. The system was antiquated, so the electronic part of it really failed us. It really exposed the government. It exposed the lack of technology that where we should be. So if it's a family member or whoever it may be, they can reach out to the mayor's office first if they like to, or they can reach out to our legislative office, and we will do our best. We cannot guarantee anything, but at least we could try to get you in the door to get your claim. Thank you. And guys, as we wrap up, I asked the first group of panelists, I'm gonna give you a name, and I'd like you to wrap up within 1 minute on that name. And I will start off with our city council president and George Floyd. And what does it mean to you?
The name has become symbolic. When you first hear the name, all you hear is about injustice. You think about injustice. I've learned something as a councilman, that anytime I make a decision, I always put myself in those shoes of the person that will be affected. And it is difficult to put yourself in his shoes, Benji, Assemblyman. I usually could do that, but just thinking what this man went through and how many other people go through, you wouldn't think that this day and age, this will be going on. So it's disturbing. So anyone out there that haven't taken a minute to think about what happens, sometimes you read the news, and just put yourself in this man's shoes, and for a minute, just think about it. That's all I ask. And Benji, we could speak all day about this, but I just want people, my words are just gonna be words. I think I ask people, if you really wanna know, read what took place and then put yourself in that person's shoes. That's all I gotta say.
Thank you. Director Speziel, Black Lives Matter.
You know, Black Lives Matter, to me, you know, in dealing with Zelly and seeing what's going on around the country, you know, which kicked up with, really started to gain a lot of steam with George Floyd. So it brings me to frustration, because people are so frustrated, people are hurt, people are angry. Black lives do matter. That's what we stand for here. I mean, that's what we go out to protect people every day. Doesn't matter. A good police officer, they say, sees everything. My good police officers don't see color, don't see religion, don't see race, don't see ethnicity. They see people. And, you know, when I think of Black Lives Matter, It's a movement that has a purpose, and I would like to compliment Zelly, because in dealing with him in every single demonstration that we have had here in the city of Paterson that has dealt with Black Lives Matter, no rocks thrown, no violence, not what you're seeing around the country. Yet they're just as frustrated. Yet they're just as hurt. Yet they've seen everything that went on that the councilman talked about. So it's a very difficult situation, and I understand. And all I can say is that I get it and I understand.
Thank you. Casey Melvin, Donald Trump.
Donald Trump. Okay, Donald Trump. Let's see.
I threw you a curveball there.
Yeah, right. I was waiting for the Black Lives Matter one. Okay, the Donald Trump one. Interesting. If anything, okay, I'm starting to sound like Donald Trump, right? With Donald Trump, when I think of him, when I think of his name, when I hear his name, you don't know what to expect. You don't know what to expect, and to me, in the office of the highest leadership, when you hear Donald Trump, when you see him, when he's in public, especially when it comes to the crisis and situations that we're dealing with, you know, it's kind of amazing to me how passive America can be. Because Donald Trump is the only individual right now in that office that can say whatever he wants to say, however he wants to say it, and still hold that position. So I'm kind of like glad that we had a Donald Trump in office. So moving forward, I want every critic to remember how quiet they were when Donald Trump said the things that he said with no recourse. And Donald Trump, to me, again, is the personification of I do whatever I want to do, whether you like it or not. So it's definitely something different with Donald Trump.
That was a tough one, Casey. Dr. Gaines, Kamala Harris.
Kamala Harris, for me, represents that there will be a time in my life where I could see somebody that looks like me in the highest form of office. And when we talk about being Black and a female, the way that we think about being a double minority, right? Like a minority in terms of ethnicity and a minority in terms of gender. To have someone that can defy those odds in my lifetime means that really there are no limits for me. And so to look at her and see what she is accomplishing and what she can be able to accomplish speaks volumes. And it's just a source of hope and particularly change that I think is long overdue in our country.
Thank you. Darius, Colin Kaepernick.
Colin Kaepernick, it's a very unique person. First and foremost, he basically was thrown out of the league for standing for something that's right. He is today, for our society, he serves as a martyr. He lost his career, everything he worked hard for, because he decided to stand for what's right. But I think the most important part of Colin Kaepernick is he illuminated and basically showed the owners of what they really were, that a group of men can be more concerned about a monetary gift rather than a judicial, how people are treated, how people go throughout life, and basically morals of what people represent. They care more for people standing for an anthem rather than kneeling for criminal justice reform. So I guess he served as a galvanizing dagger to all of the owners, all of the league, all of the sponsors of what they really care about. Do they care more about football? Do they really care about the well-beings and what the everyday life is for the people that work for them and generates the millions of dollars for them? So not only is he a hero, he's a martyr, but he's also someone who exposed a lot of the lead in the racial injustice and the prejudiceness of the owners itself.
Thank you. And Lieutenant Price will wrap you up with the late, great Congressman John Lewis.
I would have to start with hero, an example, the kind of person you would want standing behind you when times got tough. He is an example of what it's like to actually be beaten and stand up again and stay in the fight. So it's an example to all of us that while we're in this fight, we just remember his struggle. To be videotaped, being beaten down in the street, and to stay in the struggle this long, that is only something that a hero could do.
Thank you. And once again, I want to thank Pastor McWilliams, Trustee Bowles, everybody who worked on it today, Christ Temple Church and Family. I have a feeling that we'll be back for a part 3. We like to bring some more young folks out here to get involved. We would love to have our vice president of our city council be part of it, and the pastor will close us out. But we do remember that we do have some issues that we want to address directly with the mayor, the superintendent, and you know what? These are not asks, these are demands. And if you want to be part of that, please don't hesitate to reach out to me in my office. You could actually contact me at wimbleyevents@gmail.com. And we want to continue to build on this white paper for people of color. We want to address the issues of housing, law enforcement, education, voting, good trouble. John Lewis, November 3rd, take that rally to the polls. If you have an issue, if you have a concern, if you've ever thought that there has been an injustice to George Floyd or Breonna Taylor or Ahmaud Arbery, whoever it may be, vote. Don't let anybody tell you that voting doesn't matter. The Edmund Pettus Bridge, the bloody head of John Lewis. We have to get out here and we have to be heard. We don't have to agree on political parties. We don't have to agree on who dresses which way or what church you belong to, but we have to agree that on November 3rd, we have to have those Obama lines again. We have to see people like 08 and 12 standing in lines peacefully, making sure that your vote is heard, that your voice is heard. So folks, let's stand up. Let's stand up for our city, let's stand up for our country, and let's represent and lead the way for our young people. What will our legacy be? And at this time, we're gonna have a closing out by the pastor. Thank you guys, and thank you for allowing me to moderate.
First, let us give a hand praise, round of applause for all the panelists in both panels. Let us also give a hand praise for the moderator this evening, our Assemblyman, Benji Wembley, and his whole team. Amen. We thank you. We thank you for that. We just wanted to close out, since we are in a house of worship, wanted to close out in prayer. For those who are able, those who are watching, if you could bow your heads at this time. Lord God, we come first of all to say thank you. We know we petition you on every night, on a weekly basis, daily basis, but right now in this moment, first we want to say thank you. We thank you for this opportunity. We thank you for this discussion. When we pray that there was something said, there was something done that will motivate, that will encourage us to move towards a more just, a more equitable city. Lord, we ask at this time that you give us the courage, the strength to do what is necessary to bring about justice, to bring about freedom, to bring about equality in this city. And if it's necessary, give us the courage to get into good trouble so that we can ensure that everyone has an equal say and has equal rights in this city. We ask that everything that took place here was pleasing in your sight. And if there was anything that took place that was against your will, we ask that you reveal it, expose it, so that we may remove it. These and all other blessings we ask in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Thank you, thank you. God bless you. We get home safe.
What is happening? Yes, the world is in a slumber, full of hopeless things.
Is there anybody listening? Are you listening? You gotta keep the faith, oh my.
spirit of fear, but a power of love and a sound mind. Come on.
Famine and diseases, yo, they plague our land today. Violent state is needless, 'cause there is so much hate.
There are many questions, yeah, that often take place, yeah.
Searching for an answer, yeah. But we must keep the faith, yeah.
But I know someone that will comfort you.
And when your hope is gone, he will see you through. Yeah. If we come together, let's make a difference, y'all. I believe we can.
I believe we can,
Now, I don't know about you, but I believe in a God who could use this. I believe the children's still the future. I believe a God who renews us. I believe if he parted seas, this disease gotta bow to the ruler.
So many young constantly dying from the hand of disease, taking breath from their bodies alive. It's time to let them see, yeah. We can make it if we can see. There will be better days if we just believe.
Hope's not gone, so keep holding on. Yes, we have to keep the faith.
That one day we'll see the world be free. If we come together,
If we, I believe that we can.
My God, my God.
Stay together, work together.
take our trust from man and put it in God's hand.
I'm looking for when it's gone. No matter where you're from, you got to believe it, yeah.
Together we stand, divided we fall. Let's represent Jesus. I believe we will.
If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, I will forgive their sins and heal their land. For their young sister in South Africa, for their young brother in Nigeria, for my brothers and sisters in New York City, God is still in the healing business. Let's come together